So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the wild god sage of the Animarium, wielding the Rinnegan Naruto x Princess Shayla the 10th Tailor Earhardt Power Rangers Wild Force. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. A soul reborn, a world awakened. The first sensation was not one of light, or sound, or even of feeling, but of a profound and resonant hum. It was a vibration that existed outside the normal spectrum of sensory input. A chord struck on the very strings of his soul. It was the collective lullaby of a billion lives, the slow and rhythmic breath of a world teeming with vitality. For a being who had known the roar of Biju and the sharp, crackling song of chakra, this was something else entirely. It was deeper, older, and infinitely more vast. Naruto Uzumaki, the 7th Hokage, hero of the 4th Great Ninja War, had known death. He had felt the cold, final embrace as his life force was ripped from him by Madara Uchiha. He had walked the precipice of oblivion, conversed with the sage of 6 paths, and been gifted a power that transcended the ken of mortal men. He had returned, fought, and won. He had lived a full life, seen his children grow, and watched over a world he had helped to build. His passing, when it finally came, had been peaceful. An old man surrounded by family, his duty done. This, then, was not death. Nor was it the sterile, echoing chamber of the afterlife he might have imagined. This was a cradle. His consciousness, a flickering ember in an ocean of emerald energy, slowly began to coalesce. Memories, sharp and poignant as kunai, spiraled around him. The brilliant, defiant orange of his youth. The weight of a crimson cloak on his shoulders. The taste of Ichiraku ramen. The warmth of Hinata's hand in his. The laughter of his children, Boruto and Himawari. They were not ghosts of a life lost, but the foundational stones of the man he was, even here, in this place beyond life and death. A new set of senses began to bloom, unfurling like the petals of a delicate, yet impossibly complex, flower. He could feel the slow, inexorable grind of tectonic plates miles below. He could hear the silent, photosynthetic prayer of a trillion leaves drinking in the light of a distant sun. He could smell the rich, loamy scent of soil on a continent he had never known, and the crisp, ozone tang of a storm brewing over an ocean he had never sailed. It was overwhelming, a torrent of information that would have shattered a lesser mind. But his mind, forged in the crucible of war and tempered by the wisdom of a long life, held firm. He was an anchor in the storm, a single point of awareness in a sea of planetary consciousness. And then, a voice. It was not spoken in words, but in pure, unfiltered concepts, a telepathic cascade of imagery and emotion. Less than who are you? You are new. You are old. You are broken. You are whole. You wear the echo of the child of prophecy, yet you are not him. You burn with a light that is not of this star. Greater than. Naruto did not have a mouth to speak, but he focused his intent, his very essence, into a reply. Less than I am Naruto Uzumaki. Greater than the name felt solid, real. It was his. Less than Uzumaki, a spiral. A fitting name. You have a powerful soul. It resonates with the song of life. But it is untethered. A wanderer. Greater than. Another presence joined the first. This one was different, sharper, more focused. It felt like the glint of moonlight on a fang, the silent fall of a predator's paw. Less than he is strong. He could be a weapon. Greater than. A third, heavy and ancient, like the groaning of a mountain. Less than he is more than a weapon. He is a possibility. Greater than. A cacophony of other voices joined. A chorus of primal consciousnesses, each a different facet of the natural world. The soaring cry of an eagle, the deep growl of a bear, the sinuous hiss of a serpent. They were the wild Zords, the ancient, sentient guardians of this world, and he was floating in the very heart of their being, the Animarium. Less than he possesses the Rinnegan, greater than a voice noted, a tone of pure, analytical curiosity. Like a shark tasting the water. Less than a power not seen since the Great Schism. It is a key. Greater than. Naruto felt a phantom sensation, a familiar pressure in his eyes. He focused, and the ether around him shifted. His nascent, spiritual form solidified, and he could see. Not with eyes of flesh and blood, but with the divine gaze of the Rinnegan. He saw the threads of life, the flow of natural energy, the very fabric of reality itself. And in the center of it all, he saw them. Not as giant, metal beasts, but as magnificent, towering spirits of pure energy, a celestial menagerie of impossible beauty. A new voice, singular and gentle, cut through the chorus. It was feminine, melodic, and held an authority that commanded the respect of even these titans. Less than peace, my friends. He is not a weapon, nor a key. He is a guest, and he is afraid. Greater than. The primal voices receded, their immense presence pulling back, giving him space to breathe in this non-space. Naruto focused on the source of the gentle voice. A form began to coalesce before him, woven from moonlight and memory. A young woman with kind, ancient eyes, wearing the elegant white and gold attire of a princess from a forgotten age. Less than I am Princess Shayla, greater than she communicated. Her mental voice as soothing as a calm river. Less than guardian of the Animarium. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, are a miracle. A soul from beyond our veil, drawn here by the desperate prayer of the earth itself. Greater than. Naruto felt a question form in his mind, sharp and urgent. Less than why? Greater than. Less than because we are dying. Greater than, Shayla replied, and for the first time, he felt the undercurrent. Tea of sorrow beneath the world's vibrant hum. A discordant note, a creeping sickness. Less than, a shadow from our past has returned. The orgs, beings of pollution and destruction, who seek to defile all that is pure. They have grown strong, and the earth, wounded by the carelessness of its children, can no longer fight them alone. It cried out for a champion, and your soul, powerful and adrift, answered the call. Greater than. She extended a spectral hand. Less than, the earth has chosen you. The wild Zords accept you. They wish to grant you a gift. A new life. A new purpose. To be not merely a protector, but a part of this world. To be its sage. Its first and only wild god sage. Will you accept? Greater than. To live again. To fight again. A part of him, the old, weary Hokage, recoiled. He had earned his rest. But another, deeper part, the indomitable spirit of Naruto Uzumaki, stirred. The feeling of this world, the sheer, beautiful, untamed life of it, resonated with the sage energy he had always commanded. This was a world worth protecting. This was a fight worth fighting. He reached out, his own ethereal hand grasping hers. The moment their essences touched, the universe exploded. The hum became a roar. The emerald ocean of energy surged into him. A tidal wave of pure life force. It filled the cracks in his soul, healed the ancient scars of his past life, and reforged him. A body, real and solid, burst into existence. He felt the thunderous beat of a new heart in his chest, the rush of air into powerful lungs. He stood, naked and magnificent, in the heart of the Animarium, no longer a spirit but a being of flesh and blood, yet so much more. The Rinnegan in his eyes blazed with cosmic power, the concentric circles a deep, royal purple. His skin, once pale in old age, was now tanned and vital. His hair, once white, was a brilliant sun-kissed blonde. Wild and untamed, the whisker marks on his cheeks seemed sharper, more feral. He was Naruto Uzumaki, but remade, infused with the very essence of the planet. Princess Shayla was no longer a spirit either. She stood before him, her form solid, her eyes wide with an awe that bordered on reverence. The energy pouring off him was immense, a comforting, sun-drenched warmth that made the very air around him feel alive. It is done, she breathed, her voice now audible, a soft and musical sound. Welcome, Naruto Uzumaki, sage of the Animarium. Before he could reply, a violent tremor shook the celestial island. A klaxon, ancient and sorrowful, echoed through the air. On the surface of a mystical pool of water in the center of the chamber, an image appeared. It was a city of steel and glass. A place Naruto's mind, now filled with a sliver of the world's knowledge, identified as Turtle Cove. And in that city, chaos reigned. A creature of twisted metal, pulsating pipes, and spewing black sludge was tearing through the streets. An org. Shayla's face hardened. They are brazen. To attack in broad daylight. Naruto looked at the image, then down at his own hands. He clenched them into fists, feeling a power that dwarfed anything he had ever known. It was the power of his chakra, his sage mode, now amplified 1,000-fold, seamlessly merged with the raw, planetary energy of the Animarium. A body, Naruto said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that surprised even him. It held the easy confidence of his youth, layered with the wisdom of his age and the power of a god. A purpose, and a target. You have good timing, princess. He looked at Shayla, a slow, charismatic smile spreading across his face. It was a smile that had reassured armies and calmed beasts. I'm going to need some clothes. Lieutenant Taylor Earhardt of the United States Air Force believed in three things: the structural integrity of a well-maintained F-22 Raptor, the undeniable superiority of American air power, and the meticulously detailed checklist she followed before every single flight. Her world was one of physics, aerodynamics, and procedure. It was a world of order, precision, and control, which was why the last 6 months had been a special kind of hell for her. Ever since she had been flying a training exercise and had seen it. A colossal, soaring red eagle, bigger than AC-5 Galaxy. That seemed to be made of pure light and energy. It had flown alongside her for a moment, its intelligent eyes meeting hers, before vanishing as if it had never been. The official report called it a high-altitude weather balloon combined with solar flare-induced hallucination. Taylor called it the reason she was now grounded, undergoing mandatory psychiatric evaluation, and on the fast track to a dishonorable discharge. So, instead of breaking the sound barrier at 50,000 feet, she was sitting in a Turtle Cove coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm latte and staring out at the rain-slicked street. She was trying, and failing, to convince herself that she had imagined it all. That she wasn't going crazy. That's when the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a rhythmic, pounding tremor. Thump, thump, thump. Taylor's instincts, honed by years of combat training, screamed at her. She was on her feet in an instant, her eyes scanning for the threat. She saw it a block away. It was a monstrosity, a bipedal creature easily 30 feet tall, a grotesque fusion of rusted industrial machinery and pulsing, organic tissue. A massive turbine in its chest spun with a sickening whine, spewing a thick, black smoke that sizzled as it hit the wet pavement. Its arms were wrecking balls, and it was methodically smashing its way through buildings, the sound of shrieking metal and terrified screams filling the air. Taylor's mind, which was trained to analyze, categorize, and formulate a response to any threat, went completely blank for a full 1.2 seconds. This was not in any manual. This was not a known variable. This was impossible. Then her training kicked back in. Civilian casualties. Threat assessment. Catastrophic. Objective. Mitigate damage. Assist evacuation. She was unarmed, out of her jurisdiction, and completely out of her depth, but she was not going to stand by and watch people die. She burst out of the coffee shop, shouting at the panicking civilians. Get back. Move away from the street. Get inside, now. Her voice, trained to cut through the roar of a jet engine, commanded attention. People, lost in their fear, turned to her, their eyes finding the confidence and authority in her posture. They began to scramble for cover. The monster, which she was now mentally labeling Turbine Chet, turned its featureless head towards her. A series of metallic clicks and whirs emanated from it, and it raised one of its wrecking ball arms. Taylor's blood ran cold. She had made herself a target. Well, damn, Earhardt, she thought with a grim sense of irony. At least you'll go out doing something useful. She stood her ground, bracing for the impact. But it never came. Instead, a blur of motion, a flash of blonde and black, landed between her and the org. The impact of the landing was silent, not even a whisper of displaced air, yet the pavement beneath the man's feet cracked slightly, radiating outwards like a spider's web. He stood with his back to her, and Taylor's analytical mind took over again, cataloging details despite the absurdity of the situation. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build that was evident even through his simple attire. Black shinobi-style pants, matching sandals, and a form-fitting black short-sleeved shirt under a sleeveless, high-collared white haori, closed at the front by a thin red cord. The back of the haori was adorned with a strange, yet powerful-looking, red spiral symbol. His hair was a wild, spiky shock of the brightest blonde she had ever seen. He didn't seem to have a weapon. He didn't seem to have a care in the world. You're making a mess, the man said, his voice calm and casual, yet it carried over the sounds of destruction with impossible clarity. The turbine org let out a deafening metallic screech and swung its arm down, a multi-ton wrecking ball moving with terrifying speed, aimed at turning the blonde man into a red stain on the pavement. Taylor screamed a warning, a useless, reflexive sound. The man didn't even flinch. He simply raised one hand, palm open, and caught the wrecking ball. The impact was immense. A shockwave of force blasted outwards, shattering every window for a block and sending Taylor stumbling backwards. But the man didn't move an inch. He just stood there, holding the massive weapon in one hand as if it were a child's toy. The ground beneath his feet was now a crater. But he was unmoved. "That's rude," he said, his tone one of mild disappointment. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he tossed the wrecking ball, and the arm attached to it, up into the air. The massive limbs sailed hundreds of feet into the sky, tumbling end over end. The org staggered back, clutching the stump of its shoulder, which gushed a thick, oily substance. Before it could recover, the blonde man vanished. He didn't run. He was simply there one moment and gone the next. He reappeared directly in front of the org's chest, his right fist cocked back. "Shinra Tensai," he said. The words utterly foreign to Taylor. He didn't punch the creature. He opened his hand and pushed. An invisible, irresistible force erupted from his palm. It wasn't an explosion of fire or light, but a pure kinetic blast. The entire 30-foot-tall orb was lifted from its feet and hurled backwards down the street. It crashed through building after building, a titan-sized bowling ball, before finally coming to a stop in a heap of rubble and twisted metal nearly half a mile away. The street fell silent, save for the distant sound of sirens and the gentle patter of the rain. The blonde man slowly lowered his hand and turned to face Taylor. And for the second time in 6 months, her world tilted on its axis. It was his eyes. They were purple, not violet, or lavender, but a deep, royal purple, with a series of concentric black rings spreading out from the pupil. They seemed to hold an ancient power, a cosmic knowledge that made the F-22 Raptor seem like a paper airplane. He offered her a disarming, almost sheepish grin. The whisker-like marks on his cheeks crinkled, giving him a fox-like appearance. "Sorry about the windows. Things got a little out of hand." Taylor could only stare, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. A man had just caught a wrecking ball, thrown it into the stratosphere, and then pushed a giant monster through several city blocks. And now he was apologizing for the property damage. What are you?" She finally managed to stammer, her voice barely a whisper. He walked towards her, his movements fluid and utterly confident. He stopped a few feet away, his purple eyes seeming to look right through her, assessing and understanding everything about her in an instant. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said, his charismatic smile returning. "And I'm the new guy in town. You must be Taylor Earhardt. The Red Lion told me you had a strong spirit." He wasn't wrong. Taylor's breath hitched. The Red Lion. The giant, impossible creature from her hallucination. This man, he knew about it. He was connected to it. This was real. All of it. Her finely honed military discipline, the only thing keeping her sane, reasserted itself. She straightened her back, her expression hardening into a mask of professional neutrality. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You just caused millions of dollars in damages and used some kind of unregistered advanced weaponry in a civilian zone. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Naruto's smile didn't falter. He simply chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "I don't think so. Your people, your rules, they don't really apply to me, or to the things that are coming. But don't worry." He gave her a wink that was both incredibly arrogant and unbelievably charming. "I'm one of the good guys." With that, he turned and began to walk away. "Hey, stop. I'm not done with you," Taylor shouted, taking a step to follow him. He glanced back over his shoulder, his purple eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Yes, you are, for now, but we'll see each other again very soon, Taylor Earhardt. The eagle always flies highest in the storm, after all." And then, in a swirl of leaves that seemed to appear from nowhere, he was gone. Taylor stood alone in the rain-soaked, devastated street, her heart pounding in her chest. Her world of logic, order, and procedure had been irrevocably shattered. In its place was a world of giant monsters, spectral lions, and a man with purple, ringed eyes who could stop wrecking balls with one hand. And for the first time in a very long time, Lieutenant Taylor Earhardt had absolutely no idea what her next move was. She was a pilot without a plane, a soldier in a war she didn't understand. And it was both terrifying, and undeniably, thrilling. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Call of the Wild. The air on the Animarium tasted of ozone, petrichor, and blooming flowers that had no name in any human language. It was a living atmosphere, it with a palpable energy that hummed against the skin and settled deep in the lungs. For Naruto, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. He stood at the edge of the floating island, the swirling cotton candy clouds of the world below forming a majestic, slow-motion ocean. Before him, a waterfall cascaded from the sky, its water not falling into a pool but dissolving into sparkling mist that fed the impossibly green landscape. This was a place of pure life, a stark and beautiful contrast to the war-torn landscapes that had defined so much of his previous existence. Princess Shayla approached him from behind, her footsteps as silent as falling cherry blossoms. She carried a simple wooden tray bearing 2 steaming ceramic cups. The aroma that wafted from them was of jasmine, mint, and something else. Something wild and sweet that spoke of the island's unique flora. "You are troubled," she said, her voice a gentle melody against the backdrop of the celestial waterfall. It wasn't a question. Her connection to the Animarium was so profound that she could feel the subtle fluctuations in its sage's emotional state. Naruto accepted a cup, the warmth seeping into his palms. He took a sip, the flavor exploding on his tongue, at once calming and invigorating. "Not troubled," he corrected, his gaze still fixed on the world below. "Just assessing. The pieces are on the board. But they don't know they're part of a game yet. The wild Zords will call to them," Shayla said, her faith in the ancient process absolute. "It has always been this way. When the need is great, the spirits of the Zords reach out and test the hearts of humanity, seeking those with the courage and nobility to become their partners. That process is slow," Naruto countered, turning to face her. His purple eyes, holding the wisdom of a century and the power of a deity, were soft but firm. "It relies on chance, on a worthy soul happening to be in the right place at the right time. We don't have time for that, Shayla." That turbine org was a probe, a simple foot soldier. Master Org is testing the world's defenses. When he discovers how weak they've become, he won't send one at a time. He'll send an army. He remembered the endless tide of white Zetsu, the sheer, overwhelming numbers that had nearly broken the back of the allied shinobi forces. He would not allow this world to face such a threat unprepared. Shayla's expression was one of concern. But to interfere with the calling, it is a sacred tradition. The bond between a ranger and their Zord must be forged through a personal trial, a moment of profound understanding. "And it will be," Naruto assured her, placing his empty cup back on the tray. "I'm not going to choose them. The Zords have already done that. Their spirits have tagged certain souls across the planet. I can feel them, faint whispers on the wind of the world's life force." He closed his eyes, and for a moment, his entire being seemed to expand, to merge with the humming energy of the Animarium. A pilot grounded for seeing things others could not. A boy who moves with the fluid grace of the shark, yet is trapped in a world of polished lanes and plastic pins. A man whose hands are strong enough to crush stone, yet chooses to nurture the most delicate of flowers. Another, a true child of the wild, whose heart beats in rhythm with the lion's roar. And a scholar, whose mind yearns to connect with the wisdom of the tiger's spirit. He opened his eyes, the Rinnegan seeming to glow with an inner light. "The connections are there, Shayla. They're just faint, tenuous threads. All I'm going to do is give them a little tug. I won't force the trial, but I will make sure the classroom is ready for the students when they arrive." Shayla looked at him, her ancient eyes seeing not just a warrior, but a leader of profound wisdom. The traditions of the Animarium were old, but the world had changed. Perhaps its protector needed to change with it. "What will you do?" she asked. A confident, almost mischievous, smile played on Naruto's lips. "I'm going to use a technique my old teacher called aggressive recruitment. First, you need the right tools." He held out his hand, palm up. A swirling sphere of emerald green energy, the pure life force of the Animarium, coalesced above it. Into this, he channeled his own chakra, a brilliant gold that entered, wined with the green like a divine helix. The light was blinding. He molded the energy with the practiced ease of a master sculptor, his fingers weaving intricate patterns in the air. 5 distinct shapes began to form within the light, slowly solidifying from raw energy into physical matter. When the light subsided, 5 objects hovered in the air before him. They were sleek, metallic devices, resembling cellular phones, but with an organic, almost living quality to their design. Each was colored and shaped to evoke a specific animal. One a powerful, regal red and gold like a lion's mane, another a sleek, aerodynamic yellow reminiscent of an eagle's wing, a third a deep blue with the sharp, clean lines of a shark's fin, a fourth a solid, powerful black like a bison's horn, and the last a graceful white, etched with patterns like a tiger's stripes. The old legends speak of the G-phones, Shayla breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. But they were artifacts of a bygone era. I never dreamed. Old tech, new design, Naruto said, plucking the red one from the air. It felt warm, a faint pulse beating within it like a tiny heart. I've infused them with my own sage chakra and a direct link to the Animarium's core. They're not just communicators or morphers. They're conduits. They will amplify the Zords, guide their chosen to their trials, and when the time comes, allow them to channel the power of this sacred place. I call them growl phones. He grinned. Catchy, right? Shayla simply shook her head, a small, wondrous smile on her lips. In a single day, this man from Anat, her world had demonstrated a level of power and ingenuity that surpassed anything she had witnessed in 3,000 years. He was not just a protector, he was a force of nature in his own right. Now then, Naruto said, his tone shifting to one of decisive action as he set the growl phones down. Let's send out the invitations. Unidentified male, approximately 6 feet, 1 inch tall. Estimated weight, 190 pounds. Caucasian. Hair, blonde. Eyes, purple. Major General Marcus Thorne of the United States Air Force read the report in a flat, incredulous monotone. He looked up from the file, his gaze fixing on the young woman standing at perfect attention on the other side of his polished mahogany desk. That's your official statement, Lieutenant Earhardt. Yes, sir, Taylor replied, her voice crisp and unwavering, betraying none of the turmoil that had been churning inside her for the past 24 hours. Your statement goes on to describe this unidentified male, atching a 2-ton wrecking ball with his bare hands, and then propelling the 30-foot hostile entity, which, I might add, has completely vanished from the scene along with 90% of the WREC. Cage, a distance of over 10 city blocks with what you describe as an invisible push. Thorne closed the file with a soft thud. Taylor, I've known you since you were a cadet at the academy. I sponsored your entry into the Raptor program. You are, without a doubt, one of the finest pilots this nation has ever produced. Which is why this hurts. He gestured to the file. This is gibberish. It's he kind of fantasy you'd read in a comic book. First, the giant spectral eagle, now this. The brass thinks you've cracked. They're talking about a permanent medical discharge. With all due respect, sir, I have not cracked, Taylor said. Her jaw tight. I have reported what I saw. Accurately and without embellishment. What you think you saw, Thorne corrected gently. There was a gas main express explosion at the industrial park on the edge of town. The leading theory is that it created a concussive chain reaction, and a pocket of hallucinogenic gas was released. It would explain the widespread, and frankly, contradictory eyewitness accounts. It would also explain this. Taylor's fists clenched at her sides. A gas leak. That was their explanation. It was neat, tidy, and utterly, infuriatingly wrong. It didn't explain the impossible physics. It didn't explain the man who called himself Naruto Uzumaki. It didn't explain how he knew her name. Or how he knew about the Red Lion. Sir, she said, choosing her words carefully. I am a trained observer. My ability to accurately perceive my surroundings under extreme pressure has been tested and verified countless times. I am telling you that what is in that report is the truth. Thorne sighed, a deep, weary sound. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the bustling airbase. The world is a complicated place, Lieutenant. Here are things going on that you and I are not privy to. Sometimes, the best a soldier can do is follow orders and trust the chain of command. He turned back to her. For your own good, I am officially ordering you to amend this report. The official cause of the incident was a gas main explosion. You were disoriented by the blast. Understood. It was a test, an order to lie, to deny the evidence of her own eyes in favor of a comfortable, officially sanctioned fiction. A week ago, she might have done it. It would have been the pragmatic choice, the path back to her cockpit. But not anymore, not after seeing what she had seen. I'm sorry, sir, Taylor said, her voice ringing with a newfound conviction. But I cannot do that. Thorne's eyes hardened. Then you are officially on indefinite leave, pending a full psychological review. You are not to set foot on this base until further notice. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Taylor snapped a crisp salute, turned on her heel, and walked out of the office, her back ramrod straight. She had lost her career. She had been branded a lunatic. But as she walked out into the bright afternoon sun, a strange sense of liberation washed over her. The ordered, predictable world she had once inhabited was gone. She was in uncharted territory now, flying without a map. And her first objective was to find out everything she could about a man with pure PLE eyes and a name that sounded like a whirlpool. The crash of bowling pins was a symphony to Max Cooper. It was a sound of perfect, controlled destruction. He watched as the last pin wobbled, then fell, completing the strike. He turned to the adoring cheers of his friends, a cocky, self-assured grin plastered on his face. At 19, Max was the undisputed king of the Turtle Cove bowling alley. He had the looks, the charm, and a hook shot that was a thing of beauty. And that, gentlemen, he announced, striking a dramatic pose, is how you become a legend. Pay up. His friend, a lanky kid named Jake, groaned as he pulled a crumpled $10 bill from his pocket. It's not fair, man. You're like some kind of bowling robot. It's not robotics, my friend, Max said, leaning casually against the ball return. It's pure, unadulterated talent. He'd been a prodigy, a natural. He'd always felt that if he'd been born in a different time, he would have been a knight, a duelist, a master swordsman. But in this day and age, a bowling alley was the closest he could get to a grand arena. He loved the competition, the feeling of being better than anyone else. As he reached for his custom-drilled ball, a flicker of movement from the lane's water dispenser caught his eye. It was just a drip, but for a split second, the droplet seemed to hang in the air, twisting into the impossible shot of a circling shark before splashing into the drain. Max blinked, shaking his head. Too many late nights, he thought. He picked up his ball, his fingers finding their familiar grooves. But as he turned back to the lane, a low gurgling sound echoed from the plumbing. The water cooler began to shake violently, then erupted, a geyser of pressurized water shooting up to the ceiling. Panic and surprised shouts filled the alley. The pipes under the lanes groaned, and suddenly, the gutters on either side of his lane began to overflow, water pouring out onto the polished wood. Max stared, his bravado forgotten. The water wasn't just water. It was dark, deep blue, and it swirled with an unnatural energy. Within the churning water of the right-hand gutter, two pinpricks of intelligent, predatory light appeared. A voice, ancient and powerful, echoed not in his ears, but directly in his mind. Less than you are fast. You are confident, but you lack depth. You skim the surface. The ocean is deep, boy. And its power is not for the shallow. Greater than. The water surged, and the spectral image of a massive blue shark, its body crackling with energy, rose from the gutter. It was easily 20 feet long, its ether form clipping through the ball return and the seating area. People were screaming and running, but Max was frozen, his eyes locked on the impossible creature. He wasn't afraid. He was intrigued. His was more real than any perfect game he had ever bowled. The shark spirit circled him, its ghostly eyes assessing him. Less than show me your courage. Show me that you are more than just a child at play. Greater than. Without thinking, driven by an instinct he didn't know he possessed, Max hefted his bowling ball. It was a 16-pound sphere of solid urethane, but in that moment, it felt as light as a pebble. A yell that was part fear and part exhilaration, he channeled all of his skill, all of his focus, into one perfect, powerful throw. He didn't aim for the distant pins. He aimed for the spectral predator circling him. The ball flew true, not like a bowling ball, but like a cannonball. It passed straight through the shark's ethereal form, which shimmered and dissolved like smoke. The ball continued, striking the far wall with enough force to punch a clean, round hole through the cinder blocks. The alley fell silent. The water receded as quickly as it had appeared, vanishing back into the drains and pipes. Everything was soaked, but the phantom shark was gone. Max stood panting, his heart hammering against his ribs. His friends stared at him, their mouths agape. "Dude," Jake stammered. "What was that?" Max didn't have an answer. He only knew that the world was suddenly a much bigger, much stranger, and much more exciting place than he had ever imagined. And deep within him, he felt a new, surging power. As wild and untamable as the ocean itself. Danny Delgado believed that every living thing, no matter how small or delicate, deserved a chance to grow. That's why he'd become a florist. In his small, cluttered shop, pedal to the metal, he was surrounded by life. The air was a heady mix of rose, lily, and damp earth. His hands, which were large and calloused from his side job in construction, moved with a surprising delicacy as he gently repotted a wilting orchid. He was a man of contrasts. Built like a linebacker, with a gentle, soft-spoken demeanor and a heart that felt a deep, empathetic connection to the plants he cared for. He often felt more comfortable with them than he did with people. They didn't judge, they just grew. His best friend and coworker, a sharp-witted young woman named Kendall, was leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "You hear about that mess downtown yesterday? Some people are saying it was a monster attack. Can you believe it?" Danny just grunted in response, his focus entirely on the orchid. He could feel its weakness, a faint, listless energy that saddened him. "Come on, little guy," he whispered. "You can do it." As he worked, a new customer entered the shop. A tall man in a long black coat, his face hidden in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. He moved with a strange, heavy silence, and the temperature in the shop seemed to drop a few degrees. He walked directly to a display of magnificent, deep black baccara roses. He picked one up, his gloved fingers tracing the velvety petals. "Strength," the man said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Beauty, but ultimately, fragile." With a sudden, deliberate motion, he crushed the rose in his fist. The petals scattered to the floor like drops of black blood. "Hey," Kendall shouted. "You break it, you buy it, pal." The man ignored her. He turned his shadowed gaze on Danny. "Tell me, florist, what is true strength? Is it the power to create beauty, or the power to destroy it?" Danny felt a chill run down his spine. This was no ordinary customer. There was a palpable aura of menace coming off the man, a feeling of ancient stone and deep, unyielding power. He stood up slowly, placing himself between the stranger and Kendall. "True strength," Danny said, his voice quiet but firm, "is knowing when to be gentle." The man let out a low, humorless chuckle. A noble sentiment, but naive. He turned and walked out of the shop, leaving the crushed petals on the floor. As soon as he was gone, every black rose in the shop, dozens of them, instantly wilted. Their heads drooped, their petals turning dry and brittle, as if their life force had been snuffed out in an instant. Kendall gasped. "What in the world?" Danny rushed to the display, his heart aching. He picked up one of the wilted flowers, trying to feel for any spark of life, but there was nothing. It was just gone. It felt like a personal attack, an assault on the very life he had dedicated himself to nurturing. A deep, powerful anger, an emotion he rarely felt, began to well up inside him. A protective instinct, as solid and immovable as a mountain, rose to the surface. And as it did, he heard a sound. A low, powerful snort, like that of a massive bull. He looked out the shop window and saw it, for just a flicker of a second, a phantom image superimposed over the street. A colossal black bison, its horns like polished iron, its eyes glowing with a calm, ancient power. It looked directly at him, gave a nod of approval, and then vanished. Danny stared, his hands still clutching the dead flower. He didn't understand what had happened. But he knew, with an unshakable certainty, that he had been tested. And that he had not been found wanting. The strength he held within himself was not just for flowers anymore. The jungle was Cole Evans' world. He had been found as a baby, raised by a tribe of people so disconnected from the modern world that they were thought to be a myth. He spoke their language, understood their customs, and moved through the dense, dangerous environment with an innate, animal grace. He knew the calls of the birds, the tracks of the jaguar, and the scent of the rain before it fell. The so-called civilized world was a place he had only visited, a world of confusing noise and strange rules that he had no interest in. Here, in the green heart of the world, he was home. He stood atop the highest peak, a sheer cliff face that offered a breathtaking panorama of the endless jungle canopy below. He had been tracking a rare medicinal herb for the tribe's shaman. A 3-day journey that had tested even his prodigious skills. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, he felt a sudden, prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He was being watched. He dropped into a low crouch, his senses on high alert. There was no sound, no scent, nothing to indicate another presence. But the feeling was undeniable. It was a pressure in the air, a sense of immense, regal power that made the jaguars seem like house cats. A low growl, so deep it vibrated in his bones, echoed from the rocks behind him. Cole spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the sharpened wooden spear on his back. Standing on a rocky outcrop, silhouetted against the dying sun, was a lion. But it was unlike any lion he had ever seen or heard of in the tribal legends. It was massive, larger than a full-grown grizzly bear, its mane a magnificent cascade of fiery red and gold. And its eyes burned with an ancient, terrifying intelligence. This was no mere animal. This was a spirit, a king. The red lion spirit let out a roar that shook the very mountain. It was not a threat, but a challenge. A call to the wild heart that beat in Cole's chest. The spirit launched itself from the rocks, not leaping, but flowing through the air like a living flame, and vanished into the jungle below. Cole didn't hesitate. He didn't know why, but he knew he had to follow. This was his trial. The hunt was on. He sprinted down the mountain, leaping over chasms and sliding down rock faces with reckless abandon. The spirit was impossibly fast, a red blur in the deepening twilight, but Cole pushed himself harder, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. He was no longer just a man running, he was an animal, his instincts taking over completely. He could feel the spirit's intent, a taunting, beckoning presence leading him deeper and deeper into the jungle's most treacherous territory. Hours passed. The moon rose, casting silvery shadows through the canopy. The chase led them through thorny thickets, across raging rivers, and into a network of ancient, vine-choked ruins. Finally, the spirit led him into a vast, circular clearing, in the center of which stood a single, massive stone altar. The red lion spirit stopped, turning to face him, its form blazing with power. Cole skidded to a halt, breathing heavily, his body covered in scratches and mud. But his eyes burned with a fierce, determined light. He had kept up. He had met the challenge. The spirit's voice filled his mind, a voice that sounded like thunder and a crackling fire. Less than you have the feet of the leopard and the breath of the hawk. But do you have the heart of a lion? Greater than. The spirit charged. Cole stood his ground. He dropped his spear. He knew that this was not a fight of flesh and bone. As the fiery beast bore down on him, he did not raise his fists. He opened his arms, his expression one of complete, unwavering trust and acceptance. He would not fight this magnificent spirit. He would welcome it. The red lion spirit, inches from impact, dissolved into a torrent of red energy that washed over and into him. Cole cried out as the raw, untamed power of the king of the wild Zords flooded his being. It was a fire that did not burn, but purified. It connected him not just to the lion, but to every living creature in the jungle, in the world. He was a part of it all. When the light faded, Cole was on his knees, panting. He felt more, stronger. He was still Cole, but he now carried the heart of the lion within him. He looked down at his hands, and lying in the dirt before him was a small, red, phone-like object. He picked it up. It felt warm, alive. And in his mind, he heard a new voice, a human voice, calm and powerful. Less than well done. Your journey is just beginning. Greater than. Alyssa Enrale found her sanctuary not in nature, but in the hallowed, silent halls of the Turtle Cove University Library. She ran a hand lovingly over the cracked leather spine of an ancient, forgotten text. The scent of old paper and binding blew a comforting perfume. While her peers were focused on parties and modern politics, Alyssa was fascinated by the past, by the myths and legends that shaped the world long before the age of steel and electricity. She was a brilliant student, but it was more than academic, it was a passion. She felt a genuine connection to the stories of old. She was currently researching a pre-Columbian culture that local legends claimed could communicate with animal spirits. Most scholars dismissed it as primitive folklore, but Alyssa believed that all myths were rooted in a kernel of truth. She had just found a faded, almost illegible passage, and was using a magnifying glass to decipher the archaic script. And the 5 great spirits chose their champions: the soaring eagle, the surging shark, the iron bison, the roaring lion, and the 5th, the guardian of the north, the keeper of wisdom, the noble white tiger. Alyssa's breath caught. The white tiger. It was a recurring motif in the region's folklore, always depicted as a bringer of balance and a protector of sacred knowledge. The passage continued, but it was no longer a historical account. It was a riddle. Where the stone gaze of the beast meets the rising sun, upon the house of knowledge, its journey is done. Speak its name, and the path of wisdom will be open to you. A riddle, hidden in a 1,000-year-old text. This was the kind of thing she lived for. The house of knowledge. The library, of course. The stone gaze of the beast. There were 2 large stone lion statues at the main entrance. But they faced south. This had to be something else. Her mind raced, cross-referencing the library's architecture with local history. She remembered reading that the library's original east wing, which had been incorporated into the modern structure, had been funded by an eccentric benefactor in the early 1900s. His family crest, a tiger. Her heart pounding with excitement, she left the dusty archives and headed for the east wing. It was a beautiful, older part of the building, with marble floors and high, arched windows. And there, high above the main archway, was a magnificent, life-sized stone sculpture of a snarling tiger. It was an architectural flourish most students never even noticed. It faced east, directly into the rising sun. Speak its name. Alyssa stood beneath the statue, feeling a strange, expectant energy in the air. It felt silly, but she followed the riddle's instructions. The noble white tiger, she whispered, her voice barely audible in the cavernous hall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the stone eyes of the tiger statue began to glow with a soft, white light. The light flowed down from the sculpture, pooling on the floor in front of her. It was not a physical light, but something more, something that seemed to bypass her eyes and shine directly into her mind. The world around her dissolved, the library vanishing, replaced by a serene, snow-covered landscape under a full moon. Before her stood the source of the light, a magnificent white tiger, its fur the color of fresh snow, its black stripes like strokes of elegant calligraphy. Its eyes were not the eyes of an animal, but of an ancient, impossibly wise being. Less than you seek knowledge, child, greater than. Its voice echoed in her thoughts, a voice that was both feminine and powerful, like a sage and a queen combined. Less than, but knowledge without compassion is a hollow thing. A weapon without a hand to guide it. Greater than. I understand, Alyssa stammered, overwhelmed by the sheer presence of the spirit. Less than to you. Greater than, the tiger spirit challenged. Less than. A man comes to you, starving. In your left hand, you hold a book containing all the secrets of agriculture, which could teach him to feed himself for a lifetime. In your right hand, you hold a loaf of bread, which will save him from starvation today. Which do you give him? Greater than. It was a classic philosophical dilemma. Alyssa didn't hesitate. The bread, she said firmly. Knowledge is useless to a dead man. I give him the bread to save his life, and then, I sit with him and use the book to teach him how to grow his own. One action solves the immediate crisis. The other prevents it from happening again. Compassion and wisdom must work together. The white tiger spirit's eyes seemed to soften, a spectral smile touching its lips. Less than. Well answered, child of man. You understand balance. You are worthy. Greater than. The vision faded. Alyssa was back in the library, the light gone from the statue. She was breathless, her mind reeling. Lying on the marble floor at her feet was a beautiful, elegant white object, shaped like a phone and etched with the stripes of a tiger. As she reached for it, she knew, with the same certainty as the rising sun, that her life of quiet study was over. The legends she had only read about were real, and she had just been invited to become one of them. Across the planet, 5 disparate souls, their trials complete, looked at the strange devices in their hands. Taylor Earhardt, sitting in her small, sterile apartment, stared at the Yellow Eagle-themed phone she had found placed carefully on her nightstand, a single yellow feather beside it. Max Cooper, Danny Delgado, and Cole Evans all held theirs, a sense of wonder and destiny settling over them. As Alyssa Enrelay's fingers brushed against the cool, smooth surface of the white Growl phone, all 5 of the devices activated at once. They lit up, and a swirling vortex of green energy and golden leaves erupted into existence before each of them. It was a doorway, a portal to a world unknown. Frightening, yes, but also an irresistible call to adventure, a promise of answers, a chance to be part of something greater. One by one, they made their choice. They stepped through. They arrived in a disorienting flash of light, not one at a time, but all at once, as if they had stepped through 5 different doors that all led to the exact same point in space. They stumbled into a rough circle, finding themselves on a floating island under a sky that seemed to be made of liquid gold. Before them was a serene, mystical pool of water, a celestial princess with an impossibly ancient aura, and a tall, blonde man whose presence was so immense it felt like standing next to the sun. Cole, the wild man, was the first to recover, his eyes wide with wonder, not fear. Taylor immediately fell into a defensive stance, her sharp gaze locking onto the man she'd met in the street. Max looked around, a disbelieving whistle on his lips. Danny seemed overwhelmed, simply trying to take in the impossible beauty of the place. Alyssa clutched her Growl phone, her mind racing, trying to fit this impossible reality into a logical framework. They were a collection of total strangers, a disgraced pilot, a jungle dweller, a bowler, a florist, and a scholar. They had nothing in common, save for the strange devices in their hands and the bewildered expressions on their faces. Naruto Uzumaki looked at the 5 of them, the future of this world, assembled before him. He saw their confusion, their fear, their courage, and their potential. Princess Shayla stood beside him, her expression one of hopeful reverence. He took a step forward, his purple Rinnegan eyes seeming to gaze into each of their souls simultaneously. He gave them his signature, charismatic grin, a smile that promised danger, adventure, and the chance to become legends. "Welcome," he said, his voice echoing with the power of the Animarium itself. "I've been waiting for you. Class is in session." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers in Concrete Jungles. The transition from the raw, untamed majesty of the Animarium to the sterile, climate-controlled environment of a high-tech briefing room was instantaneous and jarring. One moment, the 5 newly chosen rangers were standing on sacred ground under a golden sky. The next, they were in a minimalist chamber that seemed to be carved from polished obsidian. There were no visible doors or windows, and the only light emanated from the floor, casting long, dramatic shadows. In the center of the room was a large, circular table, its surface as black and reflective as a still midnight lake. "Where are we?" Max asked, his voice echoing slightly in the unnerving silence. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual cool demeanor visibly rattled. "This is a workspace," Naruto answered, his voice calm and steady, a grounding presence in the alien environment. He stood at the head of the table, looking completely at ease. "A pocket dimension I created. Think of it as a tactical operations center. No surveillance, no distractions. A place for us to think." He gestured for them to gather around the table. As they approached, its surface shimmered and came to life. It wasn't a screen, it was a 3-dimensional, holographic display that seemed to float just above the black mirror. A perfect, rotating globe of the Earth hung in the center, crisscrossed with millions of faint, glowing lines of light. "This is our world, as seen through the lens of its own technology," Naruto explained, his fingers dancing over the projection, manipulating it with effortless grace. "Every satellite transmission, every fiber optic cable, every cellular signal. It all generates a faint energy, a digital ghost that I can see and interpret." The globe zoomed in with breathtaking speed, focusing on Turtle Cove, news reports, security camera footage, and social media feeds popped up in miniature windows, all showing the aftermath of the turbine org's attack. Taylor's eyes narrowed. You can access any network. That's impossible. The level of encryption on military and government servers alone. Encryption is just a lock, Naruto said, not unkindly. And any lock can be picked if you have the right key. His purple Rinnegan eyes flashed for a second. My key is a bit more universal than most. He swept his hand, and the news reports vanished, replaced by a new set of data streams. These were different, coded, encrypted, and highly compartmentalized. They showed energy readings, geological surveys, and satellite trajectories. The data was converging on a single point. A sprawling, heavily industrialized port on the east coast, the Veridia City shipping hub. Our enemy isn't just the orgs, Naruto continued, his tone becoming more serious. He pulled up a corporate logo, a stylized silver shield with a sharp, angular eagle on it. This is Aegis Global Security, a private military corporation. They deal in advanced weaponry, corporate espionage, and plausible deniability for the highest bidder. Officially, they're a logistics and security firm. Unofficially, they're a private army with better tech than most countries. He highlighted a series of energy readings on the map. That turbine org left a unique energy signature in its wake, an exotic radiation that decayed within a few hours. Aegis managed to get a reading on it. They don't know what it is. But they know it's powerful, and they're greedy. They've been cross-referencing that signature with deep Earth geological scans, looking for anything similar. He pointed to a blinking red dot in the middle of the Veridia City port. And they found it. A powerful, dormant energy source, buried deep beneath a container yard. A wild Zord, Alyssa breathed, her scholar's mind putting the pieces together. Exactly, Naruto confirmed. The giraffe Zord. And if Aegis gets their hands on it, they won't see a sacred guardian spirit. They'll see a limitless power source to be dissected, weaponized, and sold. We can't let that happen. And we certainly can't let the orgs get to it first. Which brings us to our first mission. Taylor straightened instinctively, her military training kicking in. What's the operational plan? A direct assault to secure the asset. Naruto shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. Aegis has the entire port locked down. They have a battalion of highly trained soldiers and a fleet of attack drones. A direct assault would be messy and loud. We're ghosts. We don't exist. We can't afford to announce ourselves to the world's military powers. Not yet. He expanded the holographic display, showing a detailed schematic of a gleaming, 100-story skyscraper in the heart of Veridia City. This is Aegis Tower, their global headquarters. The Zord's exact location, along with all the geological data and their excavation plans, is stored on a single, isolated server in a black site data vault in the sub-basement. The plan is not to attack the port. It's to infiltrate this tower, steal the data, and wipe their servers clean. We get the location, and we send them on a wild goose chase to the other side of the planet. Danny, who had been listening in quiet contemplation, spoke up. Infiltrate. That place looks like a fortress. Every fortress has a crack, Naruto said confidently. He looked around the table at the five of them. He could feel their apprehension. Their doubt. They were not a team yet. They were a collection of gifted but inexperienced individuals, thrown into a world that defied everything they knew. The four of you will be my eyes and ears on the ground, providing tactical support and monitoring communications from a mobile base I've set up. I'll handle the infiltration myself. Taylor bristled. With all due respect, you can't go in alone. You need backup. I'm a trained operative, and you're an excellent one, Naruto agreed, his gaze meeting hers. There was no condescension in his eyes, only calm, unshakable confidence. But this isn't a mission that can be accomplished with conventional training. It requires a different skill set. Your role is just as critical. I need a sharp, tactical mind monitoring my progress. Analyzing incoming data in real time. I need you to be my mission commander from the outside. Can you do that, Lieutenant? He had framed it not as an exclusion, but as a delegation of authority. He was speaking her language, acknowledging her skills while simultaneously asserting his own unique capabilities. Taylor was taken aback. Her first instinct was to argue, to insist on being on the front line. But looking at the man before her, a being who could bend reality to his will. She knew it was a pointless argument. He was right. She wouldn't be backup, she'd be a liability. Understood, she said, the word tasting like defeat, yet also, strangely, like the beginning of trust. I'll need full access to your comms and any sensory data you can feed me. You'll have it, Naruto promised. He then looked at the others. Max, Danny, Cole, Alyssa. Your job is to support Taylor and learn. Watch, listen, and see how this works. This is your first lesson. The Saint important one. An enemy is not just defeated by strength, but by intelligence. He clapped his hands together once, a sharp, resonant sound. The holographic display vanished, and the obsidian room dissolved around them. They were standing on a rooftop in Veridia City, the night air cool and damp. Below them, the metropolis glittered, a sprawling circuit board of light and life. A few feet away was a nondescript white van, its interior packed with an impossible amount of high-tech monitoring equipment that hummed softly. Naruto was no longer wearing his white haori. He was now dressed in a simple, dark gray suit, impeccably tailored, with a black shirt and no tie. He looked like any other high-powered corporate executive in the city. The transformation was so complete that it was startling. Showtime, he said with a grin. He handed Taylor a small, silver earpiece. Keep me updated. Before she could respond, he took a casual step off the edge of the 30-story building. The other four gasped, rushing to the edge, expecting to see a splattered form on the pavement below. But there was nothing. He had simply vanished into the night. Taylor put the earpiece in, her heart pounding a nervous, unfamiliar rhythm. Whisper 1, this is Eagle Eye, she said into the tiny mic, her voice all business. Do you copy? Naruto's voice came back, calm and clear in her ear, laced with a hint of amusement. Loud and clear, Eagle Eye, I'm approaching the target. Try to keep up. The subterranean lair of the orgs was a perversion of nature. It was a cavern of pulsating, organic tissue, dripping with a foul-smelling slime. And lit by the sickly, bioluminescent glow of mutated fungi. In the center of this grotesque cathedral, a massive, twisted throne pulsed with a dark energy. This was the Org Nexus, and from it, Master Org watched the world through pools of polluted water. Two figures knelt before the throne. One was Jindrax, a flamboyant Org who styled himself a master swordsman. His face a demonic mask of theatrical pride. The other was Duchess Toxica. She stood out in this place of crude, monstrous forms. She was humanoid, her features sharp and intelligent, her movements possessed of a sinister grace. She wore a dark, form-fitting uniform adorned with horn-like pauldrons, and a short, elegant cape. She was a conductor of poisons, a weaver of toxins, and Master Org's most cunning servant. The Turbine Org was a failure. Master Org's voice boomed, a sound like grinding stone and dying trees. It was destroyed, and its energy signature has alerted the humans to a place of power. Jindrax scoffed. Bah, I should have gone myself. A few flashy sword moves, and the humans would be running in terror. Brute force is your only tool, Jindrax, Toxica said, her voice a silken purr with a venomous edge. She rose to her feet, her red eyes gleaming with intelligence. It is the hammer that sees every problem as a nail. But this problem requires a scalpel. She turned to the throne. Master, the humans, this, Aegis, are clumsy. They are digging a well, but they do not know what kind of water it will yield. Allow me to go. I will not attack their fortress. I will walk in through the front door. I will steal their research from under their noses and claim this power for the glory of the orgs. Master Org was silent for a moment, the pulsing of the Nexus a slow, thoughtful rhythm. You are ambitious, Toxica. Very well. Do not fail me. Jindrax, you will prepare our forces. If her subtlety fails, your flashy sword moves may be required. Toxica bowed, a smug, triumphant smile on her lips. As you command, Master. She turned and swept from the chamber, her cape swirling behind her. Jindrax watched her go, muttering under his breath. Subtlety was for the weak, he thought. But Toxica knew better. True power wasn't just the ability to destroy, it was the ability to control, to manipulate, to turn your enemy's strength into their most profound weakness. And she was a master of the art. Aegis Tower was a monument to corporate paranoia. Its lobby was a cavern of sterile white marble and brushed steel. The security guards were ex-special forces, armed with state-of-the-art weaponry. The security system was a multi-layered web of biometric scanners, motion sensors, pressure plates, and laser grids, all monitored by a sophisticated AI. To the world, it was impregnable. To Naruto Uzumaki, it was a playground. He walked through the front doors as Mr. Kenji Tanaka, a senior acquisitions consultant from a subsidiary corporation based in Tokyo. The Henge no Jutsu was perfect. Not just his appearance, but his body language, his micro-expressions, even the faint scent of expensive cologne, were all part of the illusion. The security badge he wore as a flawless forgery he'd created in seconds, its data chip programmed with the highest level of clearance. He passed the retinal scanner with a casual glance. The AI cross-referenced his retina against the database. Found a perfect match for Mr. Tanaka, and the light turned green. Clearance confirmed. Eagle eye, Naruto sub-vocalized, his voice a whisper in Taylor's ear. Proceeding to the executive elevator. From the van, Taylor stared at the blueprints of the tower on her screen. Copy that. Be advised, the elevator has a weight and biometric sensor. It's keyed to Tanaka's exact body mass and heart rate. Already accounted for, Naruto replied. As he stepped into the elevator, he subtly manipulated the chakra in his body, minutely increasing his density to match the weight on file. He calmed his heart rate to a perfect 65 beats per minute. The elevator accepted his credentials and began its silent, swift ascent. He bypassed 3 more checkpoints with similar ease, using a combination of his flawless disguise and his sage-enhanced senses, which allowed him to feel the flow of electricity in the walls and the patterns of the guards' patrols long before he saw them. 2. Taylor and the others watching through his eyes via a Rinnegan-linked feed, it was like watching a ghost. He was never in the wrong place. He never made a single misstep. It's unreal, Max whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. He's walking through that place like he owns it. The final obstacle was the data vault itself. It was located in a sub-basement, accessible only by a single, heavily reinforced door. The door had no handle, no keypad, just a solid slab of titanium alloy. Okay, this is the hard part, Naruto's voice came. The door is sealed, no conventional access. Taylor, what are you seeing? Taylor's fingers flew across her keyboard, analyzing the schematics Naruto was feeding her. The vault is a completely isolated system. Lead-lined walls, no wireless signals. It's on its own power grid. The door is magnetically sealed. To open it, you need to simultaneously deactivate 4 power conduits located in different parts of the building. It's impossible for one person. Impossible for one human person. Naruto corrected. From his pocket, he produced 4 small, 3-pronged kunai, identical to the ones his father had used. He'd forged them on the Animarium from a unique, chakra-conductive metal. He tossed them into the air, and they hovered for a moment before vanishing in a flicker of golden light. In 4 different locations throughout the skyscraper, a maintenance closet on the 80th floor, a utility conduit behind the server farm on the 50th, a junction box in the parking garage, and a power transformer on the roof, the kunai reappeared, embedding Themsel Vase silently into the conduits Taylor had identified. Okay. Eagle eye, Naruto said. On my mark. He placed his hand on the vault door. He could feel the immense magnetic forces holding it shut. Mark. From her console, Taylor watched 4 critical power signals on the schematic blink red and go dark at the exact same instant. Naruto channeled a small, precise pulse of chakra into his hand. The massive titanium door, its magnetic locks disabled, slid open with a soft hiss of depressurized air. Cole let out a low whistle of admiration. He didn't just open the door. He picked the lock from a mile away. The data vault was a room bathed in a cold, blue light, its walls lined with humming server racks. In the center was a single, black terminal. As Naruto stepped inside, the door hissed shut behind him. He wasn't concerned. He strode to the terminal and placed his hand on it. Instead of typing, he closed his eyes. His mind, amplified by Sage Mode, flowed into the machine, bypassing walls and security protocols as if they were made of mist. He was a god in the machine, sifting through petabytes of data in mere seconds. He found the files on the Giraffe Zord, its location, the excavation plans, everything. He began the download, simultaneously building the virus that would wipe the data and create the false trail. It was then that he felt it. Another presence. Not a guard. Not a machine. Another being of power, cloaked in a sophisticated disguise. The vault door hissed open again. Naruto didn't turn around. He continued his work at the terminal, his senses spread throughout the room. A woman walked in. She was stunningly beautiful, dressed in a sharp, dark business suit. Her hair was a cascade of dark violet, and her crimson eyes held a predatory intelligence. She read a tablet and moved with the confident air of a senior executive. It was Toxica, her org nature perfectly concealed by her own formidable powers of disguise. She had used her charm and a few well-placed neurotoxins to acquire the clearance of the project's lead scientist. She stopped a few feet behind him. Mr. Tanaka, working late. Her voice was smooth, confident, and utterly false. Naruto didn't turn. He could feel the subtle toxins in the air around her, the coiled power beneath her human seeming. You could say that, Dr. Ars Thorn, he replied, using the name from the ID badge she was wearing. Just double-checking the project parameters. One can never be too careful with an asset of this value. Toxica's eyes narrowed slightly. He was good. He hadn't even looked at her, yet he knew her cover identity. This was no mere corporate drone. My thoughts exactly, she said, walking to a secondary terminal. I just wanted to run a final diagnostic myself. The board is very anxious for results. She began tapping at the keyboard, her real objective to initiate her own download, to steal the data before he could. A silent, high-stakes race began. Two beings of immense power, disguised as mortals, battling over lines of code in a subterranean fortress. The air in the room grew thick with tension. It was a duel fought not with swords or energy blasts, but with intellect and subterfuge. You know, Naruto said conversationally, his fingers still working their magic on the terminal's interface. The energy signature of this asset is fascinating. It's not nuclear, not antimatter, it feels almost alive. As if the planet itself has a pulse. Toxica paused. He was testing her, probing. An interesting theory, she replied, her tone carefully neutral. But he just deals in facts, not poetry. It is a power source. And power exists to be controlled. Does it, Naruto mused, or does it exist to be respected? Some things, doctor, aren't meant to be put in a cage. The download on his end completed. A small, green icon flashed in the corner of his screen. The virus was planted. He had won. He finally turned to face her, his disguise as Kenji Tanaka melting away like wax. His hair returned to its sun-blonde spikes, his suit was replaced by his simple black and white attire, and his eyes shifted from immortal brown to the celestial, royal purple of the Rinnegan. Toxica's breath hitched in her throat. Her composure, for the first time, shattered. The sheer, overwhelming power that rolled off him was like nothing she had ever felt. It was not the twisted, corrupt power of Master Org. It was pure, vital, and as vast as the sky. It was the power of life itself. He was not human. He was something else entirely. Who are you? She whispered, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of the small, poison-tipped blade she had concealed in her suit jacket. Naruto gave her a small, enigmatic smile. I'm the guy who believes in respecting poetry. He held up a hand. Universal pull. The tablet in Toxica's hand flew from her grasp and into his. He crushed it in his fist without a second glance. You're clever, I'll give you that. But you're playing in the wrong league. Before she could react, he was gone. Not in a flash of light, but in a silent, spatial warp that left the air shimmering. The Horizon. He was simply not there anymore. Toxica stood alone in the data vault. Her heart pounding. The alarms began to blare, the system finally detecting the intrusion and the massive data wipe. She was exposed, but she didn't care. Her mission was a failure. But she had discovered something far more important. A new player was on the board. A being of impossible power and unnerving confidence. She couldn't get the image of his purple, ringed eyes out of her mind. It was an image that sparked not just fear, but a deep, dangerous flicker of fascination. Naruto reappeared on the rooftop next to the van in the same silent warp. The other rangers stared at him. Their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Taylor pulled out her earpiece, her expression a complex mask of professional shock. All Aegis servers are down. The data is gone. There be broadcasting on all channels about a system-wide failure. They're sending their entire port security force to Siberia. Naruto grinned, slipping back into his white haori, which materialized over his shoulders. My virus was very thorough. They'll be chasing ghosts for weeks. He looked at Taylor, and for the first time, she saw past the impossible power and the casual arrogance. She saw a commander, a strategist of terrifying brilliance. He had run a flawless Black Ops mission, single-handedly, against a fortified target, and succeeded with 0 casualties and absolute precision. It was the most impressive piece of fieldwork she had ever witnessed. The respect she felt was professional, profound, and unsettlingly personal. You did it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We did it, Naruto corrected, his gaze sweeping over the entire group. This was a team effort. And it's just the beginning. He looked out over the glittering city, his eyes focused on the distant port. He now had the exact location of the giraffe Zord. But he also had a new problem. A cunning, intelligent org who now knew of his existence. The game was getting more complicated. And much more interesting. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Serpent's Shadow, the Tiger's Wisdom. The quiet of the Turtle Cove University Library was a physical presence, a weighted blanket woven from the scent of aging paper, lemon polish, and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of fluorescent lights. For Alyssa Enrele, this silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence of potential. It was the collective, sleeping voice of history, waiting for the right question to be asked. She sat at a heavy oak table in the Special Collections Archive, a pool of warm light from a desk lamp isolating her from the surrounding gloom. Spread before her was not a book, but a holographic projection emanating from a data slate Naruto had provided. On its crystalline surface swirled the raw data retrieved from Aegis Tower. To the others, it was a victory, a clean and successful mission. But to Alyssa, it was a treasure trove, a Rosetta Stone of impossible energies. While Taylor had focused on the tactical data and Naruto had seen the grand strategic picture, Alyssa was looking for the footnotes, the echoes in the margins. She had isolated the unique, residual energy signature of the dormant giraffe Zord and was now running a comparative analysis, cross-referencing it against a global database of archaeological sites known for anomalous energy readings, sites most mainstream scientists dismissed as geological quirks or instrument malfunctions. For hours, she worked in a state of pure, intellectual flow. Her fingers moved with practiced grace across the holographic interface, pulling up ancient maps, translating obscure texts, and overlaying spectral analysis charts. A pattern began to emerge, faint at first, then undeniable. The energy signatures weren't random. They corresponded, with a 92% accuracy, to sites mentioned in the most esoteric of global folklore. Tales of sleeping titans, buried gods, and places where the veil between worlds was thin. The wild Zords. They were the truth behind 1,000 myths. Digging deeper, she connected this to her own area of expertise, pre-cataclysmic global cultures. She pulled up fragments of texts, digitized from crumbling scrolls and clay tablets, all speaking of a great war of the ancients. It was a conflict on a planetary scale. A struggle between the first human partners of the wild Zords, the original Animarium warriors, and the primordial orgs, who were described not as monsters of pollution, but as beings of pure, nihilistic entropy. The war had reshaped continents, boiled seas, and ended in a Pyrrhic victory for the forces of life. Then she found it, a recurring legend, with variations in Egyptian, Minoan, and Proto-Phoenician texts. It spoke of a high general of the orgs, a being of immense cunning and power named Nazca, whose very presence was said to poison the sea and slay the sky. He was not killed in the final battle, but sealed away. The legends described his prison as a temple of black stone, built to channel the planet's own energy into an eternal cage. They called the temple Al-Ma'd al-Haya, the Serpent's Maw. The texts were chillingly specific, describing how the temple was intentionally sunk beneath the waves in the war's final days, hidden in a place where the 3 horns of the Bull King drink the sea. Alyssa's breath hitched. It was a riddle. The Bull King, Taurus. The constellation. She brought up a star chart and overlaid it with a map of the Mediterranean Sea. The 3 horns, could refer to a specific alignment with coastal geography. Her fingers flew, calculating ancient star positions, accounting for millennia of continental drift and the precession of the equinoxes. A location blinked into existence, a point in the notoriously treacherous waters of the Strait of Messina, between the eastern tip of Sicily and the southern toe of Italy, a place ancient sailors called the Maw of Scylla and Charybdis. The final piece of the puzzle slotted into place. The energy signature from the Aegis data contained a secondary, almost undetectable harmonic frequency, a dissonant, corrupted echo buried beneath the pure life force of the giraffe Zord. On its own, it was meaningless noise. But when she filtered it through the symbolic, numerological keys described in the texts about Nazca's prison, the noise resolved into a coherent, repeating signal. A waveform. It wasn't just a prison, it was a beacon. And it was weakening. Oh my God, she whispered into the profound silence of the library. She wasn't just reading history. She was hearing its dying breath. The obsidian briefing room materialized around the 5 Rangers and Naruto. The sudden transition from their various downtime activities to this stark, tactical space always a minor shock to the system. Cole had been meditating near the Animarium's celestial waterfall, while Max and Danny had been engaged in a surprisingly intense game of celestial shogi under Shayla's tutelage. Taylor had been field stripping and reassembling a rifle from Naruto's armory. A familiar ritual to calm her nerves. Report, Naruto said, his tone casual but with an undercurrent of authority that commanded their full attention. All eyes turned to Ali's. Saw as she stood at the head of the holographic table. She was no longer the quiet, hesitant scholar. Her posture was confident, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery and the gravity of its implications. The data from the Aegis mission provided more than just the location of the giraffe Zord, she began, her voice clear and steady. It contained a secondary energy signature, a kind of parasitic harmonic. I've managed to trace its origin. The globe of the Earth on the table zoomed in on the Mediterranean. Alyssa, with a newfound confidence, manipulated the display, bringing up the ancient maps, the translated texts, and the final, damning energy waveform. She laid out her research with the precision of a seasoned academic defending her thesis. She spoke of the War of the Ancients, of the Org General Nazca, and of the submerged prison, the Serpent's Maw. The prison is failing, she concluded, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her teammates. The seal, which has held for over 3,000 years, is eroding. Based on the rate of decay in the signal, I believe we have a very small window before it collapses entirely, releasing a primordial level org into a world that is completely unprepared for it. Max let out a low whistle. So, some ancient, super evil monster is about to break out of underwater Alcatraz. That's not good. Understatement of the year, Taylor muttered. Her mind already running through tactical scenarios, all of them grim. How do we fight something like that? We don't, Naruto said, his voice cutting through their burgeoning anxiety. Hee-haw. Dee listened to Alyssa's entire presentation without interruption, his expression one of deep, focused attention. He walked to her side, placing a hand on the holographic display. The faint, corrupt sig. Null she had isolated pulsed under his palm. We make sure he never gets out. He turned to Alyssa, and the look in his Rinnegan eyes was one of profound respect. The memories of the planet are a vast, chaotic ocean. I can feel the great events, the tsunamis of power, but it's nearly impossible to pick out a single drop of water. You, with human intellect, with dedication and passion, you found that single drop. You did something I couldn't have done. Well done, Alyssa. Alyssa felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. To be praised by him, to have her work validated on such a fundamental level by a being of his stature, was more gratifying than any academic accolade. This mission is critical, Naruto continued, his focus shifting back to the team. And it's going to be different. This isn't about infiltration or brute force. It's about wisdom, history, and a deep understanding of the forces at play. For that reason, Alyssa will be the mission lead. A stunned silence fell over the room. Taylor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Max and Danny exchanged a wide-eyed glance. Alyssa's research brought this to our attention, Naruto stated, leaving no room for argument. Her knowledge is our primary weapon here. I will accompany her as tactical support. The rest of you will be on standby on the Animarium. If this goes wrong, you will be our last line of defense. He then looked directly at Alyssa. This won't be like flipping through a book. That temple is a dangerous place. Are you ready? Alyssa met his gaze, her initial show. CK giving way to a surge of determination. This was her chance to prove that her strength, the power of her mind, was just as vital as the other's physical prowess. I am, she said, her voice firm. Good, Naruto said with a nod. He clapped his hands once, and the scene around them shifted. The briefing room vanished, replaced by a secluded, serene training ground on the Animarium, a flat expanse of mossy earth surrounded by ancient, weeping trees. Then your training begins now. He stood opposite her, a dozen feet away. The pressure at the depths we're going to is immense. Scuba gear would be too cumbersome and could be compromised by the temple's defenses. You need to learn to move as if the water is not there. The key is a shinobi technique, precise chakra control. He guided her through the basics. His teaching style a patient, intuitive blend of explanation and demonstration. He had her focus on molding her nascent ranger energy, her connection to the Animarium, into a thin, pressurized shell around her body. It was an adaptation of the same principle ninjas used to walk on water, but far more complex. Don't fight the pressure, he instructed, his voice a calm anchor as she struggled. Become one with it. Let it flow around you. You are the white tiger. You move with silent grace, whether in a forest or at the bottom of the ocean. Feel the energy of the water, understand it, and it will obey you. For an hour, she practiced, failing repeatedly. The energy shell would flicker and collapse, or it would be too rigid, hindering her movement. She grew frustrated, the psi success of the library replaced by the harsh reality of physical application. I can't do it, she said, panting with exertion. Naruto walked over to her. You're trying to command it, like a general ordering a soldier. That's Taylor's way, it's not yours. You're a scholar. You don't command a book. You read it, you understand it, and you learn from it. Do the same with the energy. Listen to it. What is it telling you? His words clicked. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and stopped trying. Instead, she just felt. She felt the flow of life in the air around her, the deep hum of the Animarium beneath her feet. She extended that sense to her own energy, not as a tool to be wielded, but as a part of herself. She visualized the water, not as a crushing enemy, but as a supportive embrace. A thin, shimmering aura, perfectly contoured to her body, flickered into existence. It was stable, flexible, weightless. She opened her eyes and looked at Naruto, a triumphant smile on her face. He smiled back, a genuinely proud expression. There, you see, wisdom isn't just knowing things, Alyssa. It's knowing yourself. Now, let's go for a swim. The Mediterranean was a dazzling sheet of sapphire silk under a cloudless sky. The boat Naruto had procured, a sleek, impossibly fast hydrofoil that bore the logo of a recently bankrupted tech billionaire, cut through the waves, leaving a churning white wake. Alyssa stood at the bow, the warm, salty spray misting her face, her white growl phone in her hand acting as a compass, homing in on the ancient, corrupt signal. The sheer, vibrant life of the world above was a stark contrast to the dark, forgotten secret they were approaching. Dolphins leapt in their wake, and the sun felt warm and benevolent on her skin. It was hard to believe. They were heading toward a place of such profound evil. It's beautiful up here, she said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. Naruto stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, his white haori fluttering in the wind. He looked completely relaxed, yet his senses were spread out for miles, tasting the currents, feeling the life of the sea, alert for any anomaly. This world is, he agreed. My old world was beautiful too. But it was scarred. We had centuries of war etched into the land itself. You could stand on a peaceful field and feel the ghosts of 1,000 bloody battles. Here, the planet's energy is purer. But that purity makes the stain of the orgs even darker. He was opening up to her, sharing a piece of his past she knew he rarely spoke of. It created a bond of intimacy between them. The shared understanding of heavy burdens. You miss it, don't you? She asked gently. Naruto was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I miss the people, my family, my friends. But my duty there was done. I helped build an era of peace. Here, the work is just beginning. It's a good feeling. A purpose. He looked at her, his purple eyes surprisingly soft. A purpose I'm glad I don't have to face alone. Before she could respond, the boat's engine whined and slowed. The growl phone in her hand was vibrating intensely. We're here, she said, her voice dropping. The water around them had changed. The brilliant sapphire had deepened to a murky, foreboding indigo. The currents were chaotic, swirling in unnatural eddies, and a palpable cold seemed to rise from the depths, chilling the warm air. The maw of the beast, Naruto murmured, his eyes scanning the churning water. He could feel it now, a deep, resonant sickness at the bottom of the sea. But he felt something else, too. Something new. A flicker of cold, sharp intent, as silent and deadly as a shard of obsidian. It was a consciousness, hidden, patient, and predatory. He didn't alert Alyssa. This was her mission, her trial. She needed to learn to trust her own instincts. Deep below them, cloaked in a thermocline that rendered her invisible to sonar and most forms of energy detection, a figure watched the hydrofoil come to a stop. Her form was sleek and serpentine, her armor the color of an oil slick on black water. Her helmet was shaped like the flared hood of a cobra, and her mask was a stylized viper's skull. Its empty eye sockets glowing with a faint, malevolent green light. This was Onakage, the shadow serpent, the most elite assassin in Master Orb's employ. She had not been sent. She had come of her own accord. Drawn by the whispers of the failing seal, a power source she believed could elevate her own deadly arts to a new level. But now, she had a new prize in her sights. The being on the boat, the blonde male. The energy he radiated, even when suppressed, was like a sun. It was a power that offended her sensibilities, which were honed in the darkness and the silence. He was a challenge, a true master to be tested, broken, and surpassed. The female beside him was nothing, a gnat. Onakage coiled in the silent darkness, her patience absolute. The hunt had begun. Ready? Naruto asked. Alyssa took a deep breath and nodded. She closed her eyes and activated the energy shell they had practiced. A shimmering, near-invisible aura enveloped her. Naruto did the same, his own aura a steady, golden light. Stay close, he said, and trust your instincts. They stepped off the side of the boat and plunged into the sea. There was no splash, no sudden shock of cold. The energy shells displaced the water perfectly, creating a pocket of breathable air and normal pressure around them. They were two figures descending into a dark, alien world, illuminated only by the faint glow of their own power. The descent was eerie. The sunlight faded quickly, replaced by a crushing, absolute darkness. Strange, bioluminescent creatures drifted past them like lost stars. The silence was the most profound Alyssa had ever experienced, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. Then, they saw it. Rising from the abyssal plain was a structure that defied all laws of architecture and nature. The Serpent's Maw. It was a temple of cyclopean scale, built from a non-reflective black stone that seemed to drink the light. It was vast, angular, and covered in millennia of coral and marine growth. Yet it still radiated an aura of undiluted menace. The entrance was a massive, arching doorway carved to resemble the gaping mouth of a titanic sea serpent, its stone fangs dripping with seaweed. As they drifted towards it, Naruto held up a hand, stopping them. Wait, he pointed towards the entrance. Alyssa squinted, and then saw it. The water around the fangs was shimmering, distorting in a way that wasn't natural. A magical ward, she whispered, recognizing the principles from her research. A passive defense system. It looks like it's designed to shred anything that passes through it on a molecular level. How do we get past it? Naruto asked, testing her. Alyssa's mind went to the texts. The temple was a prison, but its builders, the ancient Animarium warriors, would have needed a way in and out for maintenance. There had to be a key. Speak its name, the riddle from the library echoed in her mind. A different context, but the same principle. The ward is keyed to a specific vibrational frequency. She reasoned aloud, thinking through the problem. A password, spoken in the ancient tongue. It's not about the sound, but the intent and the precise pronunciation of the name of the prison's first warden. She accessed her data slate, which Naruto had waterproofed, and pulled up the relevant passage. The warden's name was Kepri Ra. She focused, took a breath, and spoke the name, not just as a word, but as a concept, pushing the very meaning of it outwards. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, the shimmering distortion around the entrance flickered and died. The path was clear. Naruto gave her an approving nod. Lead the way, Mission Commander. Inside, the temple was a labyrinth of echoing, water-filled halls. The only light came from glowing, pulsating runes carved into the black stone walls, casting an eerie green and purple glow. The silence was even more oppressive here, and the cold was bone-deep. They moved cautiously, Alyssa in the lead, her EY's scanning the runic script that covered every surface. She realized quickly that the entire temple was a lock. A massive, complex machine disguised as a place of worship. These runes, she explained, running her fingers over a glowing script. They tell the story of the war. But it's also a sequence. A historical catechism. To proceed, we have to activate certain runes in the correct chronological order of the war's major battles. For the next hour, they navigated the treacherous halls. It was a test of Alyssa's encyclopedic knowledge. She would identify the next part of the sequence, and Naruto, with his precise chakra control, would channel a small amount of energy into the correct rune, deactivating the trap or opening the next sealed door. They worked in perfect sync, her mind and his power a single, effective unit. All the while, the feeling of being watched intensified. Alyssa felt it now, a primal sense of dread that made the hairs on her arms stand up. A shadow would flicker in the corner of her vision. But when she turned, there was nothing. A sudden, cold current would swirl past, feeling like a ghostly touch. Naruto was acutely aware of their stalker. Onokage was a master of stealth. She was using the temple's bizarre acoustics and strange energy fields to mask her presence, her movements as silent and fluid as the water itself. She was a true shinobi, and he felt a flicker of professional respect for her skill, even as he prepared to counter her inevitable attack. They finally reached a vast, circular chamber at the very heart of the temple. The room was a massive dome, and in its exact center, floating in defiance of gravity, was a colossal, multifaceted crystal, easily 30 feet tall. It pulsed with a brilliant white light, the pure life energy of the planet. But running through its core, like a black, cancerous vein, was a crack. From this crack, a steady, thick stream of black, viscous energy was leaking out, poisoning the surrounding water. This was the seal, the prison's power source, and it was moments from catastrophic failure. The corrupt energy was beginning to coalesce in the water below the crystal, a shadowy, humanoid form starting to take shape. Nazca was waking up. We have to reinforce the seal, Alyssa said, her voice urgent. Now, but it was too late for a simple approach. As they moved towards the crystal, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling above. Onokage dropped from the darkness, silent as a falling stone. She didn't aim for Naruto. She aimed for the perceived weak link. Two streams of impossibly fast projectiles, slender black Senbon needles, shot towards Alyssa from opposite directions. It was a classic pincer attack, impossible to dodge. Naruto moved in a blur. He appeared in front of Alyssa, his hands a flicker of motion, and caught every single needle between his fingers. He didn't even seem to be trying. Onokage landed lightly on the chamber floor, her body coiling like a serpent ready to strike. Two more versions of her shimmered into existence on either side. Water clones. The big one is mine, she hissed, her voice a dry, venomous whisper that seemed to come from all three of her forms at once. The little mouse is yours to play with. The two clones, armed with blades of hardened, razor-sharp water, shot towards Alyssa. Alyssa reacted on instinct, shouting, "It's time for wild access." A flash of white light filled the chamber. When it faded, she was the White Tiger Ranger, her bio-suit gleaming in the eerie light, her tiger baton in her hand. The clones were on her in an instant, their attacks fast, fluid, and relentless. Alyssa found herself on the defensive, parrying the water blades, her mind struggling to keep up with the coordinated, two-pronged assault. Meanwhile, Naruto faced the real Onokage. "You're skilled," he said, his voice calm as he casually tossed the poisoned needles aside. They dissolved into black ink before they hit the ground. "But you picked the wrong target. Your power is an ostentatious flood," Onokage hissed, her body blurring as she charged him. "Mine is the single, perfect drop of venom that can poison the ocean. Technique will always triumph over brute force." She moved with a speed that would have been invisible to a normal human. Her primary weapon materialized in her hands, a kusarigama, but instead of a chain, it was a long, prehensile strand of shadowy energy. And the weight at the end was a sharp, vicious-looking sickle. She spun it with blinding speed, a whirlwind of dark energy and sharp steel. Their battle was a stark contrast to the brawl with the turbine org. This was a duel of masters. Naruto didn't use any of his overwhelming power. He met her technique with his own superior technique. He moved with the fluid grace of a leaf on the wind, his body seeming to flow around her attacks. He deflected the sickle with the back of his hand, sidestepped the sweeping chain by a hair's breadth, and countered her lightning-fast strikes with simple, almost lazy-looking blocks that nonetheless completely neutralized her momentum. He was analyzing her, dissecting her style, her rhythm, her every feint and gambit. As they fought, the main crystal let out a deep, groaning sound. A large chunk of it broke off and fell, shattering on the floor. The shadowy form of Nazca below it grew larger, more defined. Two burning red eyes opened in the darkness. Naruto glanced at the crystal, then at Alyssa, who was being pushed back by the relentless assault of the water clones. He knew he had to end this. He effortlessly caught Onikage's chain, yanking her off balance. In that split second of vulnerability, he vanished and reappeared behind her, a single finger pressed against the back of her neck. "Checkmate," he said quietly. Onikage froze, a genuine shock running through her. He had been toying with her. The entire fight, he could have ended it at any second. The humiliation was a cold fire in her gut. The fight is with the seal, not with her. Naruto called out to Alyssa, his voice sharp with command. He didn't take his eyes off Onikage. "She's a distraction. The tiger doesn't get drawn into the serpent's games. It strikes at the head. Use your wisdom, Alyssa." His words cut through her panic. Use your wisdom. She wasn't a brawler. She was a scholar. She looked past the clones, at the bigger picture. The runes on the walls, the cracking crystal, the leaking energy. She saw it then. A pattern in the chaos. The seal wasn't just a cage of light, it was a circuit of balanced energy. The dark energy leaking out was pure entropy. But the white energy of the crystal was pure life. The seal was failing because the balance was broken. It needed not just power, but a specific, harmonizing energy. "Savage slash," she yelled. She didn't attack the clones. She channeled the power of her Zord through her tiger baton and slammed it not against an enemy, but onto the chamber floor. A wave of pure, white energy shot out, not as a destructive blast, but as a calming, ordering wave. The two water clones dissolved instantly, their chaotic forms unable to exist in the harmonized field. She then leapt onto the altar below the great crystal. Ignoring the nascent form of Nazca, she looked at the intricate runic circles carved into the stone, the very heart of the locking mechanism. It was the riddle from the texts, made manifest. Balance. The ancient warriors used the 5 core elements of the Zords in balance to power this thing. She realized, it doesn't just need power, it needs the right kind of power. She thrust her tiger baton into the central runic circle. "White tiger, give me your wisdom. Lend me your balance." She closed her eyes and poured all of her energy, all of her intent, into the seal. She didn't push with brute force. She guided the energy, visualizing it not as a dam to hold back the darkness, but as a healing agent, knitting the fractured crystal back together on a metaphysical level. The great crystal pulsed with a brilliant white light. The crack began to close, the black vein of entropic energy being pushed back, contained. The shadowy form of Nazca let out a silent, frustrated scream as it was dissolved by the purifying light. Onikage watched, her single-minded focus on Naruto broken by the girl's unexpected move. She had been so focused on the warrior, she had completely dismissed the scholar. And in doing so, had lost. The prison was stabilizing. Her chance was gone. With a move of pure, liquid grace, she twisted out of Naruto's hold, a small smoke bomb exploding from her palm. The smoke was thick and black, absorbing all light. "This is not over, Sage," her voice hissed from the darkness, filled with a newfound, burning obsession. "I will dissect your power. I will learn your secrets. And I will prove that my technique is superior." When the smoke cleared, she was gone. The sun was just beginning to rise as Naruto and Alyssa broke the surface of the sea, casting a brilliant path of gold across the now calm water. The unnatural cold was gone, the chaotic currents stilled. They climbed back onto the hydrofoil, the silence of a job well done settling between them. Alyssa, exhausted but exhilarated, demorphed, her body trembling from the massive energy expenditure. Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, a small amount of warm, healing energy flowing into her, steadying her. He looked at her, his expression serious, but his eyes filled with an immense pride. "You did it, Alyssa," he said, his voice quiet but resonant with sincerity. "When a true warrior was needed. You didn't throw a punch. You read the instructions. You won that fight not with your fists, but with your mind. That is a strength none of the others have. Never forget that." His praise, so specific and insightful, struck a chord deep within her. He saw her, truly saw her, for who she was and the unique value she brought to the team. She had faced down ancient traps, spectral assassins, and a waking evil. And had come out the other side stronger, more confident. Later, back on the Animarium, she stood in a vast, sun-drenched library filled with texts that would make her university's collection look like a child's bookshelf. Princess Shayla had shown it to her, calling it the Archive of Life. Alyssa ran a hand over a projection of the Serpent's Maw runes, her mind already working to fully understand the ancient energies she had manipulated. She was no longer just a student of the past. She was a guardian of its secrets, an active participant in its continuation. She glanced across the grand room and saw Naruto watching her from a balcony, a small, proud smile on his face. Their eyes met, and in that shared glance, there was a profound and unspoken understanding. A connection forged not in the heat of passion, but in the quiet depths of the sea, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared wisdom. A faint, warm blush touched Alyssa's cheeks, and for the first time, she felt a flutter in her heart that had nothing to do with academic discovery. The seed of a deeper bond had been planted, and in the fertile ground of the Animarium, it was already beginning to grow. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Tempest's Heart. In the wake of the Serpent's Maw incident, a deceptive calm had settled over the Animarium. The new Rangers, energized by their first real taste of victory and teamwork, had thrown themselves into training with a renewed vigor. Max and Danny were developing a surprising synergy, the former's speed and the latter's power creating a formidable combination. Taylor and Cole, polar opposites in discipline and instinct, had begun to learn from one another, their sparring sessions a tense but productive dance of structure and wildness. Alyssa, her confidence soaring, had become the team's undisputed strategist and lore master, her quiet corner of the Archive of Life now the true intellectual heart of their operations. Naruto watched them from a distance, a sense of paternal pride warming his chest. They were growing, forging themselves into the weapon this world would so desperately need. He had taken on the role of mentor, of commander, a familiar weight on his shoulders. But with it came a strange, profound sense of isolation. He was their leader, their sage, a being of a fundamentally different order. He could guide them, fight alongside them, but he could not truly stand among them. There was a chasm of experience and power that could not be bridged by camaraderie alone. He was a god trying to teach mortals how to fight monsters, and the language, at its core, was not the same. He was contemplating this, standing at the edge of the floating island and watching a distant, slow-moving weather front on the world below, when he felt it. It was not a ripple of org corruption, nor was it the pure, life-affirming hum of a wild Zord. This was something else entirely. It was a spike in the planet's raw, untamed elemental energy. A pressure building in the atmosphere over the northwestern Pacific Ocean, so immense and so perfectly focused that it could not possibly be natural. A normal storm was a chaotic tantrum of nature. This felt controlled. It had a will, a voice that spoke not in words, but in the language of barometric pressure and ionic charge. It was a voice that was calling, or perhaps, challenging. "Shayla," he said, his voice quiet. Yet it carried across the glade to where the princess was tending to a garden of luminous flora. She appeared at his side, her expression serene but her eyes alert. "You feel it as well. It's not an org," Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the churning mass of clouds on the globe below. "It feels pure, too pure, like the planet's circulatory system has developed a massive, raging aneurysm." He closed his eyes, his sage senses reaching across the globe, tasting the energy. "Ozone," saltwater, and a power so vast it was like trying to drink the ocean. There is a consciousness within it. A powerful one. I'm going to go see what it wants. Will you take the others? Shayla asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Naruto shook his head. No. This is different. It's not a mission for the Power Rangers. This feels like a conversation that needs to be had on another level. Without another word, he stepped off the edge of the Animarium. He did not fall. He simply hung in the golden sky. The raw power of the Sage of Six Paths, now fully integrated with his new divine status, allowing him to defy gravity as easily as breathing. A shimmering, golden aura of chakra flared to life around him. And he shot away from the floating island, a living comet streaking through the stratosphere, leaving a brilliant trail of light in his wake. The journey took less than an hour. The continents below a blur of green and brown. As he approached his destination, the sky began to darken, the placid blue of the upper atmosphere giving way to a roiling, bruised purple and black. The storm was a colossal, stationary super typhoon, a perfect, spinning vortex the size of a small country, centered on a single, tiny speck of land. This was no mere storm. It was a fortress. Hurricane-force winds, easily topping 200 miles per hour, slammed into his golden aura. They should have torn apart any conventional aircraft, yet he moved through them as if they were a gentle breeze. The air was a maelstrom of flying sea spray and ice crystals. Lightning, not in random chaotic strikes but in vast, coordinated sheets and focused, spear-like bolts, began to lash out at him. They were aimed, precise. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply held up a hand, and the bolts of pure plasma, each containing enough energy to power a city, were drawn to his palm, absorbed harmlessly into his being. He could feel the will behind them, the surprise and the slight tinge of frustration. This was a test, the world's most violent and unwelcoming security system. He descended through the eye of the storm, a strangely calm, circular tunnel surrounded by a towering, spinning wall of cloud. Below him was the island, Shima no Arashi, the Isle of Storms. It was a jagged shard of black volcanic rock, its shores pounded by colossal waves that would have dwarfed any warship. The island was surprisingly verdant, covered in ancient, twisted pine trees that were bent and shaped by the perpetual wind, their needles a dark, resilient green. The air tasted of salt, ozone, and wet stone. He landed silently on a beach of fine, black sand, the golden aura around him receding. The perpetual twilight of the storm's eye cast an eerie, beautiful glow on the landscape. And waiting for him, standing at the edge of the windswept treeline, was a woman. She was the source of it all, the heart of the tempest. She was tall and possessed a stark, severe beauty, like a perfectly carved statue of a goddess of war. Her long, raven black hair was pulled back in a tight, intricate braid, adorned with pins of polished obsidian and what looked like petrified lightning. She wore traditional, archaic Japanese robes, but they were the deep, shifting gray of a storm cloud, embroidered with silver EAD in patterns that mimicked electrical currents. Her eyes were the most striking feature. They were a piercing, electric blue, the color of a lightning strike against a night sky, and they crackled with an ancient, immense power. She held no weapon, yet the entire island, the entire storm system, was her weapon. Her posture was one of absolute authority, of a being utterly in command of her domain. "You have trespassed," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed a strange, resonant quality, like the distant roll of thunder. It was a voice accustomed to speaking and having the very elements obey. "This place is forbidden. You were warned by the wind and the sky. Yet you are here. Explain why I should not have the sea swallow you whole." Naruto met her electric blue gaze without flinching. He offered a small, disarming smile. "You could try, but I think you already know how that would turn out. Besides, you're the one who sent the invitation. An energy spike that big, that loud. That's not a warning. That's a flare, sent up by someone who wants to be found." The woman's expression did not change, but he felt a flicker of surprise in her energy. He had read her perfectly. "You were perceptive," she conceded, her tone still as cold as the high-altitude winds. "My name is Kagura. I am the Tempest Oracle, and the last guardian of this place. And you are an anomaly. Or has awakened on this planet that has not been felt in millennia. It sings with the very life force of the world, yet it is not of this world. That power is you. I brought you here to gauge your intent. Are you a protector, or a parasite? I'm a protector, Naruto answered simply, his smile fading into a more serious expression. This world is under my care now. Kagura took a step forward, the wind swirling around her, lifting the hem of her robes. Words are wind, easily spoken, easily broken. The planet does not trust in words. It trusts in action, in balance. I will test the nature of your power. I will see if it is the controlled strength of the mountain that guides the river, or the thoughtless rage of the earthquake that shatters the land. This is your only warning. Leave now, or face the judgment of the storm. Naruto's own smile returned, this time with a glint of challenge in his Rinnegan eyes. He had faced down mad gods and ten-tailed beasts. A storm, no matter how powerful, did not intimidate him. And more than that, he sensed in Kagura not true malice, but a deep-seated, ancient duty. She was a guardian, just like him. They were two sides of the same coin. I think I'll stay, he said. I've always enjoyed a good storm. Kagura's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Very well. She raised a single, elegant hand. The trial began. It started not with a clash, but with a display of artistry. The perpetual drizzle in the eye of the storm intensified, but the raindrops did not fall. They froze in midair, a million suspended diamonds. With a graceful gesture from Kagura, they began to move, coalescing into intricate, dancing forms. She sculpted the water into soaring dragons, graceful cranes, and snarling wolves, all of them moving with a lifelike fluidity in a silent, zero-gravity ballet. It was a breathtaking display of fine elemental control. Show me your touch, she commanded. Is it as delicate as it is strong? Naruto watched for a moment, appreciating her skill. Then, he raised his own hand. He did not touch the water. He focused on the air. The wind, which had been a chaotic force at the edge of the storm's eye, answered his call. It flowed into the calm center. 1,000 gentle currents under his precise command. He wove the wind around Kagura's water sculptures, creating a counter-ballet. Leaves of impossible shapes and colors, formed from pure wind pressure, swirled around the water dragons. A gentle breeze gave the cranes' wings the illusion of true flight. He wasn't destroying her art, he was adding to it, harmonizing with it. Kagura's eyes widened slightly. She had expected him to counter with his own raw power, to shatter her creations. Instead, he had understood the true nature of the test and responded with a level of finesse that matched her own. The water sculptures dissolved, and her expression hardened. The game of art was over. Finesse is admirable, but the world is not always a gentle place. It requires a firm hand. Can you command, as well as you can dance? She lifted both hands to the sky. The clouds in the storm wall above them began to glow with a furious, blue-white light. The air crackled, the scent of ozone becoming overpowering. With a sharp, downward thrust of her arms, she called down the storm's fury. A single, colossal bolt of lightning, thicker than the trunk of an ancient redwood, ripped through the sky. Aimed directly at Naruto, it was not a weapon of destruction, it was a pure, undiluted river of cosmic energy. Naruto looked up at the descending pillar of light, a genuine spark of excitement in his eyes. He made no move to block or absorb it. Instead, just as the bolt was about to strike him, he held up his hands and caught it. The raw power was immense. The black sand around his feet was instantly superheated and fused into a perfect circle of glass. The sound was deafening, but Naruto stood, unmoved, holding the roaring river of plasma between his hands as if it were a physical object. He wasn't struggling. He was studying it, feeling its power, its nature. Then, he smiled. He molded the lightning like a potter molds clay. The roaring, destructive energy was calmed, reshaped. He pushed his hands together, compressing the entire lightning bolt into a single, blazing sphere of white-hot energy. Then, with a flick of his wrists, he tossed the sphere into the air. It exploded, not with a bang, but with a soft, melodic chime. The sphere burst into a million points of light, each one taking the form of a delicate, glowing white butterfly. They fluttered through the twilight of the storm's eye. A silent, beautiful blizzard of pure, harmless energy, before fading into nothing. He had taken her ultimate expression of raw power and transformed it into an act of breathtaking creation. Kagura was speechless. She stared, her composure finally breaking, her electric blue eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and profound awe. No one had ever done that. Her people, the children of the storm, had commanded the elements for 5,000 years. They could start storms, stop them, shape them to their will. But this man, he had communed with the storm's very soul. How? She finally whispered, her voice losing its thunderous edge, replaced by genuine, unadulterated curiosity. You see the elements as a force to be commanded, Naruto explained, his voice gentle. A weapon to be wielded. A power to be controlled. I see them as a part of a whole. A part of me. You ordered the lightning to strike. I simply asked it to be calm. This was the fundamental difference in their philosophies. It was the difference between a king who rules through fear and a leader who rules through love. Kagura lowered her hands, the storm around them visibly, audibly, calming. The roaring wind softened to a mournful sigh. The churning clouds began to thin. For generations, we have served as the planet's immune system. We create the fevers, the storms, that cleanse the world of impurities. We wield the power so that the world does not have to. It is a great and heavy burden. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw past the goddess and saw the woman. He saw the loneliness in her eyes. The weariness of a duty held for centuries. All great power is a burden, Naruto said softly, taking a step towards her. He was no longer speaking to a potential enemy, but to a kindred spirit. The trick is to find others strong enough to help you carry it. The last of the storm wall dissolved, and for the first time in what might have been centuries, direct, untainted sunlight streamed down onto the Isle of Storms. The black sand glittered. The wet pine trees steamed in the sudden warmth. The world seemed to be breathing a sigh of relief. Kagura looked up at the blue sky. A look of wonder on her face. I have never let the storm fall, she said, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. It was always my shield. My armor against a world I was sworn to protect, but never to be a part of. She turned her gaze back to him, and her electric blue eyes, now free of their crackling energy, were deep and filled with a complex mix of emotions, respect, fascination, and a nascent, unfamiliar warmth. She had tested him to see if he was a threat, and had instead found the one being in the entire world who could truly understand the weight of her crown. You are Naruto Uzumaki, she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. She had heard the name whispered on the planetary consciousness, but had not understood its meaning until now. You are the wild god sage. I am, he confirmed. The world is changing, she said, a new resolve in her voice. The orgs are a sickness my storms cannot cleanse. My people have remained in isolation for too long. Perhaps it is time for the Tempest Oracle to remember that she is a part of the world she protects. She walked towards him, stopping just a few feet away. The sheer power radiating from both of them created a palpable field of energy in the air between them, but it was no longer a field of conflict. It was one of resonance. Harmony. You have passed the trial, Naruto Uzumaki, Kagura said, a genuine, beautiful smile finally gracing her lips. You are no parasite. You are a cure, and this island, and its guardian, will stand with you when the time comes. He had come seeking the source of a challenge, and had found an ally of unimaginable power. He had met a being who could stand with him as an equal, appear in a world of mortals he was sworn to protect. As he looked into Kagura's now clear blue eyes, he saw a reflection of his own soul, the strength, the duty, the loneliness. And in that reflection, he felt the first stirrings of a connection that went far deeper than a simple alliance. It was the profound, exhilarating recognition of finally, after so long, not being alone at the top of the mountain. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Dance of Poison and Princes. The object rested on a velvet cushion in the center of the obsidian briefing table, a soft, internal luminescence pulsing like a gentle heartbeat. It was the Kishi no Shinran, the heart of the forest, a fist-sized, uncut emerald of impossible clarity. Formed not by geological pressure, but grown over a millennium from a single, solidified drop of the Animarium's lifeblood that had fallen to earth. For centuries, it had rested in a secluded mountain monastery, its calming, stabilizing aura a boon to the surrounding ecosystem. 2 weeks ago, it had been loaned to the Turtle Cove Museum of Natural History. 48 hours ago, it had been stolen. The security was flawless, Taylor reported, her voice a clipped, professional monotone as she gestured to the holographic schematics of the museum. Laser grids, pressure plates, sonic sensors. A 20-ton vault door. All bypassed without tripping a single alarm. The only thing the cameras saw was a flicker of shadow. No forced entry. It wasn't an org. This was a professional. The ghost, Naruto said. His voice quiet. He swirled a hand over the table, and the museum schematics were replaced by a dossier of a figure who did not officially exist. A collection of grainy photos. Conflicting reports from a dozen intelligence agencies, and a list of impossible heists spanning a decade. The world's greatest art and antiquities thief. A master of infiltration and misdirection. They steal not for money, but for the challenge, and their calling card is that they always sell their prize at one place. The image on the table shifted again, showing a magnificent, baroque UE palace perched on a cliff overlooking the moonlit Adriatic Sea. The Janis Gala, a biannual, invitation-only event. The most exclusive and dangerous black market auction on the planet. The attendees are a who's who of the global underworld. Arms dealers, rogue financiers, disgraced nobles, and syndicate heads. All of them hidden behind the anonymity of a masquerade ball. So we crash the party and take it back? Max asked, a cocky grin on his face. Sounds like my kind of mission. This isn't a brawl, Max, Naruto cautioned, his Rinnegan eyes sweeping over the team. This is a den of serpents. One wrong move, and we don't just risk the mission, we expose our existence to every major criminal organization in the world. The approach has to be surgical. Infiltration, acquisition, exfiltration. Clean and quiet. He laid out the plan. It was one of layered, elegant deception. Taylor, with her tactical mind, and Danny, with his calm, observant nature, would establish a comms and surveil Lance hub on a yacht anchored in a secluded cove nearby. Their job was to be the all-seeing eye, monitoring the palace's security and providing an escape route. The other three would go inside. Cole, you have the most finely tuned instincts of anyone I've ever met, Naruto said, looking at the young man who was still more comfortable in the jungle than in a city. You'll be our primary security. You'll pose as a bodyguard for a wealthy heiress. You won't need to look for weapons or cameras. You'll feel the threats. Your only job is to stay near your principal and be ready to react. He then turned to Alyssa. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she became the focus of his attention. Alyssa, you will be that heiress. Lady Annalise of a fictitious, old-money European house. Your cover is that a reclusive collector of rare gems with a reputation for being eccentric. You'll be the distraction, the beautiful, mysterious guest that draws the eye, while the real work happens in the shadows. Can you play the part? Alyssa, who was more comfortable with dusty tones than social graces, hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding, a spark of determination in her eyes. It was a challenge, another chance to prove her versatility. And what about you? Taylor asked Naruto, her arms crossed. A charming, almost predatory smile touched Naruto's lips. Every party needs a wildcard. I'm going in as myself. Or rather, as a version of myself they can understand. Uzumaki, an enigmatic and obscenely wealthy collector from the Far East with a taste for the unique and a reputation for getting what he wants. My goal is to acquire the heart. But if diplomacy fails, I will become the ghost's ghost. The air in the grand ballroom of the Palazzo di Scorpione was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Expensive perfume, and the sweet, cloying aroma of secrets. Music from a string orchestra, hidden on a balcony, flowed like liquid gold over the assembled guests, a gentle, Nnese waltz that belied the venomous nature of the gathering. The hall was a masterpiece of decadent architecture, its vaulted ceilings painted with celestial frescoes, its walls adorned with priceless tapestries. And its floor a polished marble checkerboard that reflected the light of a dozen massive crystal chandeliers. It was a sea of the beautiful and the damned, their true identities concealed behind elaborate masks of porcelain, leather, and precious metals. A man in a gilded wolf mask, a notorious Russian arms dealer, shared a laugh with a woman in a delicate, diamond-studded hummingbird mask. The CEO of a corporation known for its brutal corporate espionage. Here, sins were status symbols, and power was the only currency that mattered. Alyssa, as Lady Annalise, was a vision. She wore a gown the color of a midnight sky, sleeveless and elegant, that shimmered with 1,000 tiny, sewn-in crystals. Her mask was a work of art, a silver filigree creation shaped like a graceful white tiger. Its edges lined with soft feathers that brushed against her temples. She held a champagne flute in a gloved hand, playing the part of a bored, ethereal aristocrat with a surprising talent. Cole stood a few paces behind her, a silent, imposing figure in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his simple, unadorned black domino mask doing little to hide the primal intensity in his eyes. He ignored the opulence, his senses focused on the subtle currents of the room, the faint, metallic scent of a concealed weapon, the almost imperceptible tensing of a man's muscles as he identified a rival, the predatory gaze of a syndicate enforcer. Naruto, for his part, was a study in controlled charisma. He wore a custom-tailored suit of the deepest indigo silk, his only adornment a single, blood-red ruby cufflink. His mask was a masterpiece of Japanese lacquerwork, a stylized, smiling kitsune face with 9 flowing tails painted on its forehead, its narrow eye slits hiding the cosmic power of the Rinnegan. He moved through the crowd with an easy, confident grace, projecting an aura of power that was not aggressive but absolute. He didn't demand attention, he simply commanded it by his presence. Men watched him with suspicion and respect, women, with undisguised curiosity. He was standing near a fountain of flowing champagne, observing the intricate dance of predators, when he felt a subtle, yet familiar shift in the room's energy. It was a cold, sharp note in the symphony of corruption, a presence as refined and as deadly as a perfectly crafted poison. His eyes scanned the crowd, and he saw her. She was standing across the room, conversing with a man in a plague doctor's mask. She wore a stunning, form-fitting gown of emerald green that seemed to be woven from serpent scales. Her mask was a simple but elegant black half-mask, shaped like a pair of thorny horns, leaving her mouth and sharp, intelligent jawline exposed. Her dark violet hair was swept up in a sophisticated chignon. To anyone else, she was just another beautiful, dangerous guest. But to Naruto, her energy signature was unmistakable. It was Toxica. Her disguise was perfect. Not a magical illusion, but a physical transformation so complete it was a testament to her power. She had suppressed her org nature, cloaking it in a veneer of sophisticated humanity. She was here for the heart of the forest, he knew it instantly. Its life-giving properties could be twisted, corrupted, reverse-engineered into a blight of unimaginable potency. Their eyes met across the crowded room. A flicker of recognition, of challenge, passed between them in an instant. The man she was talking to finished his sentence, but she didn't seem to hear him. She gave Naruto a slow, deliberate smile, a silent invitation. Then, she turned and glided onto the dance floor, where the orchestra had just begun a new, more intimate tango. Eagle Eye, I have a complication, Naruto sub-vocalized into his hidden comms. Target is not the only hostile player. We have an org in the house. Senior management. Taylor's voice was a tense whisper in his ear. Confirm ID. Do we abort? ID confirmed. Negative on the abort, Naruto replied, his gaze never leaving Toxica. The mission parameters have just become more interesting. I'm going to engage. Maintain surveillance. He placed his champagne flute on a passing tray and moved towards the dance floor. The crowd parted before him as if by instinct. He reached Toxica just as her previous partner was bowing away. He extended a hand, his bow a gesture of perfect, formal courtesy. May I? He asked, his voice a low, smooth baritone. Toxica's crimson eyes, visible even through her mask, gleamed with a dangerous light. I was wondering if you had the courage, she purred, her voice a silken melody laced with venom. She placed her hand in his. Her touch was cool, like polished marble. As he led her into the intricate steps of the tango, a palpable energy field seemed to form around them. The other dancers, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, gave them a wide berth. They were the undisputed center of the ballroom, a vortex of grace and menace. Their dance was a physical manifestation of their silent conflict. It was a duel of leading and following, of testing defenses and launching subtle attacks. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, a dance of two apex predators sizing each other up. An unexpected pleasure to see you here, madam. Naruto began, his voice a low murmur meant for her ears alone. You may call me Nightshade, she replied, her lips curving into a smile. And you are the mysterious Mr. Uzumaki, are you not? The talk of the party. They say you collect things that are unique, alive, even. I have a passion for things that grow, Naruto said, expertly spinning her in a tight circle before pulling her close again. I find the process of creation far more fascinating than the act of decay. An unpopular opinion in a place like this, I imagine. Perhaps, she conceded, her fingers pressing ever so slightly against his shoulder. A test. A faint, almost undetectable trace of a paralytic neurotoxin was on her glove. It was so subtle, it would have incapacitated a normal man for a week. Naruto's sage-enhanced metabolism identified, analyzed, and neutralized it in less than a heartbeat. But decay has its own beauty, does it not? The wilting of a rose. The crumbling of a stone. It is the natural end to all things. A form of ultimate purity. Only if you believe in endings, he countered, his hand firm and steady on her back. I, for one, am a great believer in new beginnings. In taking something that is wilting and giving it a new reason to bloom. His words struck a chord she hadn't expected. He was talking about the heart of the forest. But he was also talking about her. He could feel the conflict within her, the faint spark of something not entirely corrupt, buried deep beneath her org nature. It was this spark that fascinated him. That made her more than just another monster to be defeated. A noble sentiment, she said, her voice a fraction tighter than before. But some flowers are meant to be poisonous. It is their nature, their strength. Nature is all about adaptation, he replied smoothly. Even the most poisonous flower can be used to create an antidote. It all depends on the hands of the gardener. The music swelled to a crescendo. And he dipped her in a final, dramatic pose, their masked faces inches apart. The tension between them was electric, a dangerous and exhilarating mixture of animosity and a deep, grudging respect. The music ended. They broke apart, the spell broken. A delightful dance, Mr. Uzumaki, Toxica said, her composure perfectly restored. I hope we have the chance to compete again later. I'm counting on it, Nightshade, he replied with a nod. She turned and melted back into the crowd just as a man in a golden ram's mask took the stage. The auction was beginning. The bidding was fast and furious. A display of obscene wealth for artifacts of dark power. A cursed scythe, a grimoire bound in human skin, a mirror said to contain the souls of its victims. Naruto remained silent, his attention, and Toxica's, focused on the final item. Finally, it was brought out on a velvet pillow. The heart of the forest. The room fell silent as its gentle, green light pulsed. A beacon of pure life in a hall filled with death and decay. The auctioneer began the bidding at 10 million euros. Toxica, bidding through a proxy, was aggressive. So was Naruto. The price climbed with dizzying speed. 20 million, 30, 50. It became a two-way war. The other bidders fell away, content to watch the two enigmatic newcomers battle for the prize. The price reached 90 million, Toxica's bid. The auctioneer began his final call. Now, Alyssa, Naruto sent the mental command. Across the room, Alyssa, playing the part of the eccentric heiress, let out a dramatic, theatrical gasp. She fainted, collapsing gracefully into Cole's arms. But as she fell, her hand swept out, accidentally, knocking a massive, multi-tiered tray of champagne glasses off a nearby table. The sound of 1,000 shattering crystals was like a gunshot. It was the perfect distraction. For a split second, every eye in the room, including the auctioneers and the security guards, was drawn to the commotion. In that single, chaotic second, Naruto moved. He wasn't a blur. He was simply in one place, and then the next. He used a flicker of the Horizon, a teleportation so fast and so short range it was imperceptible. He appeared beside the auction stage, his hand hovering over the real heart. In his other hand, a perfect replica, which he had formed from a piece of wood from the Animarium. And a complex illusion technique during the dance materialized. The swap took less than 1/10 of a second. He was back in his original position before the first champagne glass had even finished shattering. No one saw a thing. 100 million, Naruto said calmly into the stunned silence that followed the crash. The bid was final. No one countered. He had won. The prize, the fake heart, was brought to him. He accepted it with a gracious nod. He caught Toxica's eye from across the room. She gave him a look that was a potent cocktail of fury, frustration, and something else he couldn't quite decipher. It was the look of a predator who had been out-hunted. She turned on her heel and swept from the ballroom, a queen in graceful retreat. Later, on the moonlit balcony overlooking the sea, Toxica stood alone. The cool night air doing little to quell the simmering rage within her. Her mission was a failure. She had been outmaneuvered, outplayed by that man. The arrogance, the power, the infuriating, charismatic confidence. She hated him. And yet, no one, not even Master Org, had ever challenged her on this level. Jindrax was a fool. The other orgs were beasts. They operated on brute force and instinct. Uzumaki operated on a plane of existence she had thought was hers alone, the realm of pure, intellectual superiority. She looked at her gloved hand, the one that had touched his shoulder. She could still feel the phantom warmth, the way his body had effortlessly neutralized her deadliest, most subtle poison. He was an enigma, a puzzle she was now obsessed with solving. The loss of the heart of the forest was a blow, but the knowledge she had gained tonight was, in its own way, far more valuable. She now understood her enemy. And the first step to destroying a man is to understand what he holds dear. Aboard the yacht, speeding away from the palace under the cover of darkness, the real heart of the forest pulsed with a soft, happy light in a containment field. The T.M. was buzzing with the thrill of their success. You should have seen it, Max said, reenacting Alyssa's dramatic feint. Oscar-worthy performance, Ally. Alyssa blushed, but she was smiling. Cole was the real actor. His look of panicked concern was very convincing. Cole just grunted, a hint of a smile on his face. He had felt the shift in Naruto's energy, the flicker of teleportation, and had known exactly when to move. He was beginning to understand that there were other kinds of hunting. Taylor, for her part, was studying the comms log, a look of deep, professional admiration on her face. Flawless execution. You ran a social stealth op against a high-threat target and played a rival agent against herself. That's textbook and then some. Naruto stood at the stern, looking back at the receding lights of the palace. He wasn't celebrating. He was contemplative. He had won the battle, but the war was becoming infinitely more complex. Toxica was not a simple monster. She was intelligent, resourceful, and she possessed a strange, twisted kind of honor. She was a worthy adversary. And in the dangerous, seductive dance they had shared, he had sensed that flicker of conflict within her. The potential for something more than just decay. He had planted a seed tonight, a thought in her mind that her nature was not her destiny. Whether that seed would grow into a flower or a more dangerous kind of poison, he did not know. But he found, to his own surprise, that he was intensely curious to find out. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Scars of the Earth. The call did not come through their growl phones. There was no alarm on the Animarium, no anxious pronouncement from Princess Shayla. It came as a wave of collective, agonizing pain that washed over the floating island, a psychic scream. So profound that the celestial flowers visibly wilted and the water in the sacred pool trembled. The wild Zords were hurting. All of them. Naruto felt it first, a sharp, sympathetic agony that lanced through his very soul. It was a cold, cloying sensation, like thick, chemical sludge being poured directly into his spirit. He stumbled, a hand going to his chest, a pained gasp escaping his lips. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, his connection to the planet's life force felt, clogged, tainted. The others felt it moments later, a disorienting wave of nausea and weakness. Cole, who was closest to the primal energies, collapsed to one knee, clutching his head. Taylor, ever the soldier, gritted her teeth and pushed through the discomfort, her eyes immediately scanning for a threat. What was that? She demanded, her voice tight with strain. The Zords, Naruto said, his voice a low, strained growl. He straightened up, his Rinnegan eyes blazing as he looked down at the holographic globe that had materialized at his feet. A section of a continent, a vast, desolate stretch of land that was once temperate forest, was glowing with a sickly, gangrenous purple light. They're being poisoned. The obsidian briefing room formed around them, the urgency of the situation overriding any need for formality. The holographic table showed the affected area in stark detail. It was a place the maps called the Ashen Belt, a sprawling, multi-hundred square mile industrial wasteland. For over a century, it had been a dumping ground for the world's most toxic chemical byproducts, a national sacrifice. Ice zone wherein regulated factories had belched poison into the sky and bled it into the earth. It was a festering wound on the face of the planet, a place so polluted that life had long since abandoned it. Energy readings are off the charts, Alyssa reported, her fingers flying across the console, her face pale. It's not org energy, not exactly. It's concentrated, weaponized, like the planet's own sickness has gained sentience. On the main screen, satellite imagery resolved, showing the epicenter. In the middle of a vast, rust-colored plain dotted with cracked, oozing chemical drums and skeletal, dead trees. Something was moving, or rather, something was forming. The toxic sludge, the poisoned earth, the very air itself was being drawn together, coalescing into a single, massive entity. It had no definite shape. It was a perpetually shifting mountain of filth, a 30-story tall monstrosity of bubbling tar, twisted metal refuse, corrosive ooze, and noxious, multicolored gas. It wasn't alive in any biological sense. It was an animation of pure toxicity, a golem sculpted from humanity's carelessness. And with every passing second, it grew larger, drawing more and more of the surrounding wasteland into its amorphous form. "We have to stop that thing," Danny said, his voice filled with a horrified disgust. The sight of such a profound defilement of the earth was a physical blow to the gentle florist. "Standard deployment," Taylor commanded, her training taking over. "We hit it hard, we hit it fast, and we neutralize it before it can spread beyond that containment zone." "It's not that simple," Naruto warned. His eyes narrowed in concentration as he felt the energy flows. "This isn't a creature to be fought. It's a symptom, a fever, attacking it directly." But there was no time to explain. A new alert flashed on the screen. The toxic behemoth had begun to move, shambling slowly but inexorably towards the edge of the Ashen Belt, towards a river that fed into the region's primary water table. If it reached that river, it would poison the water supply for millions of people. "We have no choice," Cole said, his voice grim, his hand already on his growl phone. "We fight now." Wild access. In a flash of five-colored light, they were gone from the Animarium, teleporting to the edge of the blighted lands. The sensory assault was immediate and overwhelming. The air was thick, heavy, and tasted of acid and rust. The stench was a physical force, a gag-inducing cocktail of sulfur, ammonia, and 100 other unidentifiable chemical horrors that burned the back of the throat. The ground beneath their feet was a cracked, sterile clay, and the sky above was a permanent, sickly gray dome. And before them, the monster, the Blight Org, shambled on, its very presence an insult to the concept of life. "All right, team, standard formation," called the Red Ranger. "Let's hit it with everything we've got." Jungle Sword. He summoned his crystal saber and charged, the others following suit. They were a flash of heroic color against a landscape of monochromatic despair. They were fast, powerful, and worked with a newfound synergy, their attacks a coordinated storm of steel and energy. But it was like trying to fight the ocean with a sword. Cole's slashes cut deep into the creature's sludge-like hide, but the wounds simply oozed and sealed themselves in seconds. Max's shark fighting fins struck with incredible speed, but they were just absorbed into the gelatinous mass. Danny's bison axe, which could shatter concrete, merely splattered tar and grime everywhere, which then crawled back to the main body. Taylor's eagle sword and Alyssa's tiger baton unleashed blasts of energy that were simply swallowed by the creature, causing it to bubble and swell, growing even larger. "It's absorbing our attacks," Alyssa yelled, her analytical mind processing the horrifying reality. "The energy we're using, it's just feeding it." The Blight Org, as if finally noticing them, paused its advance. A great, tarry pseudopod, the size of a freight train, rose from its mass and slammed down where they stood. They scattered, leaping away just as the attack hit, sending a tidal wave of corrosive sludge radiating outwards. "We need more firepower," Taylor shouted, already knowing the answer. "We need the Zords." But even as she said it, they all felt it. A deep, resonant refusal from their Zord spirits. It wasn't that the Zords wouldn't come, it was that they couldn't. The very atmosphere of this place was so anathema to their pure, living energy that to manifest Here would be like a human trying to breathe in a vacuum. It would cripple them. They can't get close. Cole grunted, his connection to the Red Lion telling him of the immense pain the attempt would cause. This place, it's a cancer. It's killing the very idea of them. The Blight Org let out a sound, not a roar, but a deep, gurgling, industrial groan that vibrated in their bones. It began to shamble forward again, its path to the river now clear. They were powerless. Their strength, their weapons, their Zords, all of it was useless against an enemy that was not a creature, but a place. A wound, a scar of the earth, given monstrous form. A golden light streaked across the gray sky, and Naruto landed silently between the defeated rangers and the advancing monster. He didn't even look at the Blight Org. He looked at the poisoned land around them, at the rust-colored ground and the chemical-slicked puddles, and a deep, profound sadness filled his Rinnegan eyes. You can't fight a disease by punching the patient, he said quietly. He turned to his team, his expression grim but resolute. Your part in this fight is over. Get back to the Animarium. Now, we're not leaving you, Taylor protested, her ingrained military ethos rebelling at the thought of abandoning a comrade, a commander. That's an order, Ranger, Naruto said, his voice leaving no room for argument. This isn't a battle that can be won with strength or courage. It requires a different kind of tool. He looked at Taylor, and for a moment, his gaze softened. But I will need a sentinel. Someone to watch my back. The rest of you, go. Taylor, you stay. That's the mission. The other four hesitated, but the authority in his voice was absolute. With a shared look of concern, they teleported away in a flash of light, leaving Taylor alone with Naruto. Standing before the unstoppable toxic tide. What's the plan? Taylor asked, her hand still gripping her eagle sword, ready for a fight she knew she couldn't win. What tool are you talking about? Naruto didn't answer immediately. He walked forward, stopping at the edge of a large, stagnant pool of iridescent, oily water. He looked down at his own reflection. A golden-haired god mirrored in a pool of poison. This creature isn't the true enemy, Taylor, he said, his voice soft, almost conversational. The enemy is the poison that created it. The pain of the earth itself. The Blight Org is just the scab on a festering wound. And the poison isn't just in the soil here. It's psychic. It has seeped into the planet's consciousness, into the very soul of the Animarium. It's why the Zords are in pain. Why they can't come. He turned to face her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. To stop that thing, I have to heal the wound. Not from the outside, but from the inside. I have to go into the collective consciousness of the wild Zords, find where the poison has taken root, and cleanse it. It's a spiritual battle, not a physical one. Taylor stared at him, her pragmatic, logical mind struggling to grasp the concept. Go into their consciousness. What does that even mean? It means, he said, a faint, weary smile on his lips, that for a while. My body is going to be an empty shell. I'll be completely vulnerable. That's where you come in. He gestured with his head towards a small, rocky mesa a few hundred yards away, one of the few places not covered in sludge. Get me to high ground. My body has to be protected while my mind is away. The Blight Org is a mindless thing, but the poison itself has a malevolent intelligence. It will try to stop me. It will send pieces of itself to attack my body. You are the last line of defense. You are my guardian. Can you do that? The weight of his request settled on her. He was entrusting her with his life. Not his power, not his godlike abilities, but his life itself, in its most vulnerable state. It was a level of trust, of reliance, that went far beyond the professional respect they had built. It was deeply, terrifyingly personal. Her military training had no protocol for this. But her heart, the part of her that had watched this man rewrite the laws of physics and still smile like a charming idiot, had its own answer. I've got your six, she said, the old, familiar military phrase a solemn vow. He gave her a nod of profound gratitude. He led the way to the mesa, the two of them moving with a shared, unspoken purpose. He found a relatively flat spot and sat down, crossing his legs in a meditative posture. This might get strange, he said, closing his eyes. Don't be alarmed by anything you see. Too late for that, she quipped, her attempt at humor a thin veil over her jangling nerves. She took up a defensive position a few feet in front of him, her sword held at the ready. Her gaze fixed on the approaching monster. Naruto took a deep breath. His body began to glow with a gentle, golden light. A complex, circular seal pattern, like the one on the back of his haori, appeared on the ground around him. Then, the light faded, and he became utterly still. His breathing was slow and even, but the overwhelming presence, the immense energy that always radiated from him, was simply gone. He was just a man, sitting on a rock. A vulnerable, empty vessel. Taylor's heart hammered in her chest. For the first time, she was truly on her own. And as the Blight org drew closer, she saw pieces of it, smaller blobs of tar and sludge, detach from the main body and begin to ooze and crawl their way towards the mesa. Towards Naruto. Her watch had begun. Naruto's consciousness did not fall into darkness. It ascended into a realm of impossible light. He was pure thought, pure spirit, floating in a place that existed outside of time and space. This was the nexus of the Zords, souls. The psychic garden where their primal essences resided. Normally, it was a place of breathtaking, transcendent beauty. He had been here once before, during his rebirth. But now, it was a paradise under siege. He found himself standing on what should have been the sun-drenched savanna of the Red Lion's spirit. But the golden grasses were now blighted and black, crumbling to ash. The sky, which should have been a brilliant azure, was a sickly, smog-choked gray, the color of the ashen belt. The very concept of courage, which the lion embodied, felt weak here, tinged with despair. He could see the other domains, the other souls, connected like shimmering continents in this sea of thought. The boundless sky of the eagle's focus was now filled with a corrosive, acid rain of doubt. The deep, silent ocean of the shark's instinct was slicked with a thick, rainbow-sheened oil of confusion. The solid, unshakable mountain of the bison's strength was fractured and crumbling, eroded by apathy. The serene, snow-covered forest of the tiger's wisdom was choked with thorny, poisonous weeds of misinformation. And flowing through it all, connecting the blighted realms, were rivers of thick, black sludge. The psychic poison. It wasn't just a surface contaminant. It was a systemic infection, feeding on the Zords, pain and despair, growing stronger as their spirits weakened. At the very center of this psychic landscape, where all the rivers of poison converged, was a pulsating, black heart of pure malice. The source. Less than it hurts. Greater than a chorus of 1,000 voices whispered. The collective pain of the Zords a sorrowful symphony. Less than the children of man. They have forgotten us, they have wounded our mother, and now her tears drown us, greater than. Naruto felt their pain as his own. Carelessness of humanity was not just a physical act, it was a spiritual betrayal. Less than you feel it too, sage, greater than the voice of the Red Lion rumbled, weak but still defiant. Less than this poison, it feeds on our strength. The more we fight it, the more we are consumed. Greater than. Then we won't fight it with strength. Naruto projected his thoughts, his own golden consciousness a solitary sun in this dying land. We will fight it with purity. We will remind this world what it has forgotten. He closed his spiritual eyes and reached out, not with his power, but with his very essence. He touched the blighted soil of the lion's savanna. He did not blast it with energy. He shared a memory. He shared the memory of his own indomitable will, of standing against impossible odds, of a lonely, hated child who refused to give up. He projected the feeling of Kushina's fierce, protective love, of Minato's ultimate sacrifice, of Jiraiya's unwavering belief in him. He poured pure, unadulterated courage into the land, not as a weapon, but as a seed. The blighted black grass around his spiritual feet began to change. A single, golden blade pushed its way through the ash. Then another, and another. The golden light spread outwards from him. A cleansing wave of pure, remembered courage, pushing back the despair. He moved to the next realm, the smog-choked sky of the eagle. Here, he shared the memory of his focus. The endless hours of training to perfect the Rasengan. The intense concentration of Sage Mode. The absolute, single-minded clarity he'd had when facing down Kagura. He projected the very concept of unwavering focus, a sharp, clean wind that blew through the realm, clearing the acid rain and tearing apart the smog, revealing the pure, azure sky that lay hidden beneath. One by one, he journeyed through. The poisoned souls of the great Zords. To the shark's polluted ocean, he brought the purity of instinct, the memory of the Nine Tails' power finally flowing in harmony with his own. To the bison's fractured mountain, he brought the memory of his own unbreakable bonds with his friends, the strength that came not from a single stone, but from many stones joined together. To the tiger's choked forest, he brought the wisdom he had learned from a lifetime of mistakes and triumphs, the balance he had found as Hokage. He was a spiritual healer, a psychic surgeon, cleansing the wounds not with an antiseptic of power, but with the potent balm of his own soul, his own history. Finally, he stood before the pulsating, black heart of the poison at the center of it all. It lashed out at him, throwing waves of pure despair, apathy, and nihilism at his consciousness. But these were the very things he had spent a lifetime conquering. They had no purchase on him. He did not destroy the heart. He simply surrounded it with his own golden light. He showed it the beauty of the world it was poisoning. He showed it the laughter of children, the loyalty of friends, the warmth of the sun on a peaceful day. He showed it the fierce, beautiful, indomitable will of life to persevere. The black heart trembled, its malevolent energy unable to comprehend, unable to fight against the sheer, overwhelming truth of the life it was trying to extinguish. With a final, sorrowful psychic sigh, it did not explode. It dissolved, like a drop of ink in a clean, flowing river, its malice diluted into nothingness. A wave of pure, revitalized energy washed through the nexus. The golden savanna blazed with renewed courage. The blue sky of the eagle's mind was sharp and clear. The ocean, the mountain, the forest, all were restored to their full, magnificent glory. The Zords were healed. Their collective roar of gratitude and joy echoed through the very fabric of reality. On the mesa, Taylor fought like a cornered lioness. The sludge creatures, mindless extensions of the Blight Org's will, swarmed the rocks, their attacks relentless. They were slow, but there were dozens of them. For every one she sliced apart with her eagle sword, 2 more would crawl up to take its place. She was exhausted. Her armor was spattered with corrosive slime that sizzled and ate at the surface. Her breath came in ragged gasps. But she did not retreat. She held the line. Her world had shrunk to this single, desperate purpose: protect the man behind her. She had glanced back at him several times. His body was still, but it had begun to pulse with a faint golden light. A nimbus of incredible power was starting to build around him, a warmth that pushed back the chemical cold of the wasteland. Something was happening. He was winning. The thought gave her new strength. She let out a fierce battle cry, a sound that was pure, unfiltered U.S. Air Force grit, and renewed her assault, a whirlwind of yellow and silver. Just as the largest of the sludge creatures lunged at her, its maw of tar gaping, a brilliant, golden light erupted from Naruto. It was not an explosion, but a wave, a gentle yet irresistible tide of pure, life-giving energy that washed over the entire ashen belt. It was not a destructive force. It was a healing one. The sludge creatures froze, then simply fell apart, dissolving into harmless, inert puddles of mud. The ground, a sterile, cracked clay, seemed to sigh in relief. The thick, gray sky began to thin, and for the first time in a century, a single, brave ray of sunlight broke through, illuminating the desolate landscape. The great Blight Org, its power source, its very reason for being, severed at the root, let out one last, mournful, industrial groan. Then, it crumbled. The 30-story mountain of filth collapsed in on itself, its animated form unable to hold, its toxic energy neutralized. It became nothing more than what it had always been: a massive, ugly pile of inert trash and chemical waste. The monster was dead. The fever had broken. Taylor stood panting, leaning on her sword, watching in utter, profound disbelief. He hadn't fired a single shot. He hadn't thrown a single punch. He had defeated an enemy they couldn't even scratch by sitting on a rock and thinking. Or feeling. Or whatever it was he had done. She heard a soft groan behind her. She spun around to see Naruto stirring, his eyes fluttering open. The immense, powerful presence she was used to flowed back into him, and the world seemed to settle back onto its proper axis. He looked at her, his Rinnegan eyes clear but filled with a deep, cosmic weariness. He gave her a weak, but genuine, smile. See, strange. The sheer, Overwhelming relief that washed over her was so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. She demorphed, the helmet retracting to reveal her face, streaked with sweat and grime. She didn't look like a soldier. She looked like a survivor. She walked over and stood before him. Her expression a complex storm of emotions she couldn't begin to name. Awe, relief, confusion, and something else, something deeper and warmer that was pushing through her disciplined facade. "You're the most terrifyingly, ridiculously, unbelievably," she started, but the words failed her. There was no military term for what he was, for what he had just done. She had spent her life believing in the tangible, in physics, in firepower. He had just proven to her that the greatest battles are fought in places you can't see, with weapons you can't hold. "Badass I've ever met," she finished, the word feeling laughably inadequate. Naruto chuckled, a soft, tired sound. He slowly got to his feet, a little unsteady. "I had a good sentinel." He looked out over the wasteland, at the single ray of sunlight that was now widening, pushing back the gloom. "It's not fixed," he said quietly. "The poison is still in the soil. The scars are still here. But the infection is gone. Life can begin to return now. Slowly. It will take time." He had healed the planet's soul, but the body still needed time to recover. It was a profound, humbling thought. He swayed slightly, the spiritual exertion having taken a far greater toll on him than any physical battle ever could have. Taylor reacted instantly, her exhaustion forgotten. She moved to his side, putting an arm around his waist to steady him, his arm going over her shoulders. The contact was electric. For all his divine power, in that moment, he felt human. He was leaning on her, relying on her physical strength. It was a complete reversal of their dynamic. And in that reversal, something new and fragile and incredibly powerful was born. Her respect for his power was absolute. But this feeling, this fierce, protective urge to support his weakness, was something else entirely. It was the moment Lieutenant Taylor Earhardt, the pragmatic pilot, stopped seeing Naruto Uzumaki as a godlike weapon and started seeing him as a man. A man who read the weight of worlds on his shoulders, and who, just maybe, needed someone to help him stand. "Come on, Sage," she said softly, her voice losing its military crispness, replaced by a quiet, personal warmth. "Let's get you home." As she helped him teleport away in a swirl of golden leaves, she knew her life, her world, and her meticulously ordered heart had been irrevocably and fundamentally changed. She had stood guard over a god, and in his moment of vulnerability, had found her own truest strength. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. An honorable duel, a dishonorable betrayal. It did not arrive with the blare of an alarm or the violence of an org attack. It came on the wind, a single, perfectly crafted black arrow fletched with raven feathers. It struck the ancient, moss-covered torii gate at the entrance to the Animarium's central shrine with a soundless thump, burying itself halfway into the celestial wood. It was an impossible shot, an object from the mortal world piercing the veil of this sacred space through sheer, focused intent. Attached to its shaft by a thin, crimson cord was a scroll of black silk, sealed with wax bearing the sigil of a coiled serpent. Cole was the first to see it, his wild senses detecting the minute disturbance in the natural order. By the time the others had gathered, Naruto was already standing before the gate, his expression unreadable as he gently plucked the arrow from the wood. The wound in the torii healed itself instantly, leaving no trace. He broke the seal with a practiced thumb and unrolled the scroll. The characters were written in a stark, elegant calligraphy, each stroke a masterpiece of controlled aggression. It was a formal challenge, a hadashiho, steeped in the ancient, bloody traditions of the shinobi world he had left behind. To the one known as the Wild God Sage. It began, the language archaic and formal. "I, Onakage of the Cage Ryu, first serpent of the Shadow Fang clan, invoke the right of Shigasen, a duel of honor to the final breath. You have shamed my clan. You have shorn my fangs in the serpent's maw. My honor can only be restored by the taste of your blood or the forfeit of my own. I await you at the dawn of the third day from this one's sending. At the seat of shadows, the hidden village of our ancestors. Come alone and face me as a warrior. Refuse, and the name Uzumaki will be whispered as a coward's sig. Ill in every shadow across this world for 1,000 years. A tense silence descended upon the gathered rangers. Taylor stepped forward, her face a mask of cold fury. It's a trap, obviously. No sane person accepts a formal invitation to their own execution. She calls it a duel of honor. Max scoffed, but her kind of honor involves backstabbing and poison. No way, man. Let's go as a team and flatten this whole Shadow Fang clan. Naruto re-rolled the scroll, his movements calm and deliberate. He looked not at the worried faces of his team, but out at the world below, a faint, nostalgic glimmer in his Rinnegan eyes. You don't understand, he said, his voice quiet. In the world I came from, this is a sacred contract. More binding than any law. A Hadashiho is a challenge between two warriors' souls. To refuse it is to admit that your soul is the lesser. To bring allies is to admit your own strength is insufficient. But they have no honor. Alyssa interjected, her knowledge of heist. Ori telling her that such codes were often just pretty words used to justify violence. Onakage attacked you from the shadows. Her clan ambushes people. There is no reason to believe they will abide by any rules. You're right, Naruto agreed, finally turning to face them. A small, enigmatic smile played on his lips. They have no honor. They believe honor is a pretty cage, and true power lies in doing whatever is necessary to win. They believe I am a fool who will walk into their trap because I am bound by an ancient code they themselves have abandoned. And that, he paused, his smile widening with a predatory glint. As the most delicious kind of trap to spring. He held up the scroll. I will go alone, and I will accept her challenge. Because this isn't just about Onakage. It's about her clan. An entire village of elite, technologically advanced assassins who have lost their way. They could be a devastating weapon for the orgs, or a powerful, if clandestine, ally for us. A snake that is not dealt with will always bite you when your back is turned. It's time to either pull its fangs or teach it who the charmer is. His decision was absolute, his confidence a tangible force that silenced their protests. He was not just their commander, he was their sage, and his wisdom in these matters was on a level they could not yet comprehend. He saw a chessboard they couldn't even perceive, and he was already 10 moves ahead. But what if something goes wrong? Taylor pressed, her voice betraying a deep, personal concern that went beyond tactical considerations. We won't even know. We'll be blind. Naruto walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was reassuring, grounding. I'm trusting you all to guard the world while I'm gone. That's a greater task than just watching my back. He then gave her a private, subtle wink. Besides, the eagle always flies highest in the storm. Just because you can't see me doesn't mean I can't see you. With that, he turned and walked towards the edge of the Animarium, the black scroll in his hand. He was not going to battle. He was going to a reckoning. The journey to the Seat of Shadows was not a physical one, but a navigation of concepts. The Kage Ryu clan's village was not protected by walls or armies, but by a complex web of genjutsu and spatial ninjutsu woven into the very fabric of the Japanese Alps. It did not exist on any map because it did not exist in any single, fixed location. It was a Schrodinger's village, a pocket dimension folded into the real world, accessible only to those who can. EU the precise sequence of steps, both physical and mental, to unfold it. Naruto walked a forgotten pilgrim's path, the air growing thin and cold. He passed through a grove of ancient cedars, his footsteps precise, matching the rhythm of a forgotten sutra. He crossed a rushing mountain stream, not by the rickety rope bridge, but by stepping on 7 specific, unmarked stones in a sequence that defied conventional logic. He stood before a sheer, 1,000-foot cliff face, a dead end to any normal traveler. He closed his eyes, molding his chakra, and performed a single, archaic hand seal, pushing his will into the rock. The world shimmered. The solid rock face became as insubstantial as smoke, and he stepped through into another world. The air inside was cool, sterile, and hummed with a low, almost subsonic vibration of immense, contained power. The sky above was a permanent, overcast gray, a projected dome that perfectly mimicked a cloudy day, but the light it emitted was too even, too perfect. He stood on a street paved with dark, interlocking hexagonal tiles that seemed to absorb all sound. The buildings were a jarring, yet masterfully executed, fusion of feudal Japanese architecture and brutalist, cyberpunk aesthetics. Graceful, curving pagoda roofs were made of matte black carbon fiber. Shoji screens, which should have been paper, were opaque, polarized smart glass that flickered with unseen data streams. The gentle babbling of a koi pond was punctuated by the silent, efficient hum of a patrol drone, shaped like a metallic origami hawk, as it glided overhead. This was a village of shadows. And its inhabitants were no different. They moved with a silent, eerie grace, their faces hidden behind identical, porcelain serpent masks. They wore the traditional dark shinobi shozoku. But the fabric was a non-reflective, sensor-dampening polymer. They were ghosts in their own home, their presence acknowledged only by the briefest of nods as Naruto walked the main thoroughfare. The hostility was not overt. It was a cold, suffocating pressure, the collective, silent judgment of an entire clan of assassins. A delegation of 4 masked shinobi met him in the central plaza. They did not bow, Uzumaki, the leader said, his voice filtered through his mask, flat and synthesized. The Council of Elders awaits. You will be escorted to the Chamber of Fangs to be appraised. They led him into the central keep, a towering, pagoda-like structure of black steel and dark wood. The interior was a labyrinth of silent corridors. The tatami mats under his feet were pressure-sensitive. The ink paintings on the walls were sophisticated sensor screens, and the faint scent of incense was a cover for the subtle chemical signature of an airborne truth serum. Naruto noted it all, his age senses effortlessly cataloging every trap, every sensor, every hidden weapon. He was a whale swimming in a fisherman's net, and he could feel every single thread. The Chamber of Fangs was a cavernous, semicircular room. At its center was a sunken floor, and on a raised dais at the far end sat 5 figures. The elders of the Cage Ryu. They were ancient, their faces wizened masks of cruelty and arrogance. Their eyes like chips of obsidian. They wore ornate, dark robes, and they radiated an aura of old, corrupt power. Onokage stood at the foot of the dais, to the right of the central elder. She was in full battle attire. Her cobra-like helmet held under her arm. Her face was a pale, beautiful mask of cold neutrality, but Naruto could feel the raging storm of conflict behind her eyes. So, the central elder, Lord Jinpachi, rasped, his voice like grinding stones. This is the great sage. You look unimpressive, a flamboyant child playing at being a warrior. And you look like you're about to crumble into dust. Naruto replied, his tone light and utterly disrespectful. You should be careful. A strong breeze might be the end of you. The elders' eyes narrowed. Onokage's fist, holding her helmet, clenched imperceptibly. You have a tongue as sharp as your reputation, it seems, another elder sneered. It will be cut from your head soon enough. Our Onokage has issued a challenge. An old, foolish tradition. But one we will indulge. It will be an entertaining prelude to your inevitable death. The duel will take place at moonrise in the Unmoored Dojo, Jinpachi declared. Until then, you will be shown to a guest chamber. Meditate. Pray to whatever pathetic gods you worship. It will not save you. The arrogance was staggering. They weren't just planning a betrayal, they were boasting about it. So assured were they of their own superiority and his foolish adherence to a code they despised. They saw him as a relic, a dinosaur walking into a world of laser-guided meteors. Sounds fun, Naruto said with a cheerful smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't start the party without me. As the guards escorted him from the chamber, his gaze met Onokage's for a fleeting second. In her eyes, he saw a maelstrom of emotions. Shame at her elder's blatant dishonor, fury that this duel, her duel, was being co-opted, and a deep, burning need to prove herself against him, even in this charade. She was a weapon, honed to a perfect edge, but her hilt was held in the hands of weak, corrupt men. And that, Naruto knew, was the true key to this entire conflict. The guest chamber was a prison of minimalist perfection. A single tatami mat for a bed. A low wooden table. A single, perfectly pruned bonsai tree in the corner. The walls were solid steel, woven with chakra-dampening threads. Naruto sat in the center of the room, his eyes closed, his breathing even. To any observer, he was meditating, preparing for a battle for his life. In reality, his mind was a whirlwind of activity. A command center processing 1,000 streams of data at once. He had known it was a trap from the moment the arrow had struck the gate. But the specifics of the betrayal were what interested him. He extended his senses, not as a wave of power that could be detected, but as a subtle listening, emerging with the very energy that flowed through the hidden village. He felt the hum of the central power core deep beneath the keep. He traced the pathways of the fiber optic network hidden in the walls. He felt the faint, telltale energy signature of over 300 elite assassins moving into hidden positions around the unmoored dojo. They were not just armed with blades and shuriken, they were equipped with chakra-disrupting rifles, sonic dampeners, and light-refracting cloaking devices. It was a technological death trap, designed to neutralize a powerful chakra user before they could even react. He smiled to himself. It was a good plan. A thorough plan. It would have worked on almost any other shinobi in history. But he was not just a shinobi. And they had made one fatal, arrogant miscalculation. They believed the technology was their servant. They had no idea it had already sworn allegiance to a new master. The moment he had stepped through the gateway, his divine connection to the planet's energy had allowed him to subtly, invisibly, interface with their entire network. He hadn't hacked their system. He had become its god. In the Cage Ryu Ancestral Dojo, a place of stark, cold beauty, Onakage knelt before a shrine dedicated to the first serpent, the founder of her clan. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood, whetstone, and blood. She was meticulously sharpening the blade of her kusarigama, the rhythmic scrape of steel on stone the only sound. Her mind was a battlefield. The shame was a physical, bitter taste in her mouth. This duel was meant to be hers. Her chance to face this anomaly, this sage, on the sacred ground of her ancestors and reclaim her honor through skill and blood. But the elders had turned it into a farce. An elaborate execution. They did not believe in her. They did not believe she could win. They saw her only as bait. A flashback, sharp and unwelcome, lanced through her mind. She was a child, no older than 10, standing in this very dojo. Her father, the clan leader before Jinpachi's faction had seized power, lay dead on the floor. Struck down not in honorable combat, but by a poisoned dart from the shadows during a training exercise. Jinpachi had stood over his body, his face impassive. The weak are cold, he had told her. His voice devoid of all emotion. Honor is a shield the weak hide behind. True strength is the will to do what is necessary. Remember that, child. Your father forgot. She had remembered. She had embraced his cold, pragmatic philosophy. She had trained until her bones ached and her spirit was numb. She had become the clan's deadliest weapon, their first serpent, all in the name of a strength defined by victory at any cost. But then she had met Uzumaki. In the serpent's maw, she had felt his power. It was vast, yes, but it was also clean. Uncomplicated. It was the power of a raging river, while hers was the power of a carefully concocted poison. During their brief clash, he had defeated her not with overwhelming force, but with a technique so pure, so effortless, it had shaken the very foundations of her philosophy. He had been toying with her. And that was the terrifying, secret truth that coiled in her gut. She knew, with a warrior's unshakable instinct, that even on her best day, even in a fair fight, she could not beat him. He was simply on another level. This betrayal by her elders was not just a stain on her honor, it was a mercy she could never admit she might have needed. The thought was so vile, so weak, that it made her want to scream. She finished sharpening her blade. It was perfect, a flawless edge that could sever a soul. She stood, her resolve hardening into a cold, sharp point. She would play her part. She would fight him with everything she had. She would force him to acknowledge her skill, her strength. And when the trap was sprung, she would watch, and she would learn. Because the only thing more important than defeating a superior opponent is understanding the nature of their power. Her obsession had moved beyond simple victory. She needed to know how he was so strong. She needed to dissect his very being. The unmoored dojo was a masterpiece of Cage Ryu architecture. It was a massive, circular platform of polished black wood, floating in the center of a vast, perfectly still subterranean lake. The only light came from the projected moon in the gray sky dome above, its silvery light reflecting off the water's surface, creating the illusion of a dojo floating in a sea of stars. It was a place of stark, lethal beauty. Naruto stood on one side of the platform. Onakage stood on the other. The 5 elders were seated on a viewing balcony carved into the cavern wall, looking down like ancient, malevolent vultures. 300 assassins were hidden in the shadows, in the water, on the ceiling, their weapons trained, their hearts cold. Uzumaki Naruto. Jinpachi's voice boomed, amplified by hidden speakers. Onakage of the Cage Ryu has challenged you. The laws of Shigasen are simple. There are no rules. The duel is over when one combatant can no longer fight, or breathes their last. Begin. Onakage bowed, a gesture of pure, traditional respect that was at odds with the entire situation. Naruto returned the bow, a small, genuine smile on his face. This, at least, was real. This moment between two warriors, before the farce began. The instant they straightened up, the duel was on. Onakage did not hesitate. She moved like a phantom, her body a blur of motion as she closed the distance between them. There was no wasted energy, no flashy moves. It was pure, distilled speed and lethality. Her kusarigama was a whirlwind in her hands. The weighted chain a disorienting, unpredictable dance of death, the sickle at its end a glittering arc of silver aimed at his throat. Naruto, true to his word, did not use his sage powers. He did not use the Rinnegan. He met her as a shinobi. His taijutsu was the epitome of the Leaf's style, fluid, adaptable, and deceptively powerful. He moved like water, flowing around her attacks, his hands and feet becoming a defensive wall that was both yielding and unbreakable. He deflected the sickle with a reinforced sleeve, sidestepped the sweeping chain, and parried her lightning-fast kicks and jabs with economical, precise blocks. It was a beautiful, terrifying dance. The scrape of steel, the thud of blocked strikes, and the whisper of their movements were the only sounds in the vast cavern. Onakage was magnificent. Her style was a perfect blend of acrobatics and vicious, direct attacks. She used the entire dojo, leaping onto the railings, using the chain to swing herself into unpredictable angles of assault. She was a storm of focused, elegant violence. But Naruto was always one step ahead. He was the calm eye of her hurricane. He read her movements before she made them. His decades of combat experience against the most powerful beings in his own universe giving him a preternatural understanding of combat flow. He wasn't just defending. He was learning, analyzing, and subtly, gently, pushing her. He was showing her the flaws in her own perfect technique, the small moments of overcommitment, the fractional tells in her posture. Frustration began to build in Onakage. She was fighting with every ounce of her skill, a lifetime of brutal training focused into this single moment, and she couldn't land a single solid blow. He was a ghost, a dream, a perfect, untouchable wall of pure technique. Her breath grew ragged, her attacks a fraction more desperate. She feinted with the sickle and then unleashed the true attack, a spray of Senbon needles from a hidden wrist launcher. Each one coated in a fast-acting neurotoxin. Naruto didn't even seem to look at them. His hand blurred, and when it stopped moving, he was holding all dozen needles between his fingers, their points inches from his face. "That's not going to work either," he said, his voice calm. That was the moment. Her ultimate technique, her hidden trump card, treated as a child's toy. Her spirit, for a fraction of a second, broke. She stumbled back, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning despair. And from the balcony, Lord Jinpachi's voice rang out. Now, it was the signal, the betrayal. From every shadow, 100 figures emerged. 100 more rose silently from the black water, their rebreathers hissing. Another 100 dropped from the ceiling on silent wires. In an instant, the unmoored dojo was surrounded. 300 chakra-disrupting rifles were aimed at Naruto's heart. A high-frequency, disorienting sonic pulse filled the air. The light-refracting cloaks of the assassins made them shimmer and distort, turning them into a confusing, nightmarish army of phantoms. Onakage stood frozen, her kusarigama hanging limp in her hand. The dishonor was so profound, so absolute, it was like a physical blow. Her duel, her honor, her very identity as a warrior had been rendered a complete and utter joke. "The duel is concluded," Jinpachi announced, a smug, triumphant tone in his voice. "You fought well, sage. But honor is for fools and corpses. Fire." 300 fingers tightened on 300 triggers. And nothing happened. The rifles did not fire. The sonic pulse died with a pathetic whine. The cloaking devices flickered and failed, revealing the assassins in all their stark reality. A confused, angry murmur rippled through their ranks. Naruto hadn't moved. He still stood in the center of the dojo, holding the poisoned needles. He looked up at the balcony, and the casual, cheerful mask was gone. His face was cold. His purple, ringed eyes glowed with a terrifying, cosmic power. "My turn," he said. His voice quiet, yet it echoed through the cavern with the weight of a mountain. He dropped the senbon. They clattered on the black wood. And then, he brought his hands together in a single, familiar seal. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The cavern exploded in a silent, instantaneous cloud of orange smoke. When it cleared, the dojo was no longer occupied by one man. It was occupied by 300. 301, to be precise. For every single Kage Ryu assassin, there was a perfect, solid, equally armed Naruto clone. The clones moved in perfect, terrifying sync. And the one-sided massacre became a 300-front war. On the balcony, the elders stared in horror. "What is this sorcery? Our technology, our weapons," Jinpachi shrieked. "You put too much faith in your toys." The real Naruto said. He was no longer in the dojo. He was standing directly behind the 5 elders on their own private balcony, having appeared there with a silent, golden flash of the Hiraishin. The 5 most powerful men in the Kage Ryu clan hadn't even sensed his approach. He didn't attack them. He simply placed a hand on the stone wall behind their thrones. "Your entire village is powered by a geothermal tap into a network of volcanic vents. A powerful, but very delicate, system." He channeled a minuscule, precise amount of sage chakra into the wall, say. Nding it down through the building's foundations, into the power grid, and straight into the geothermal core's primary regulatory system. "Let's see what happens when I ask it to take a short nap." Deep below the village, the hum of the generators faltered and died. The projected sky flickered and vanished, revealing the raw, dark stone of the cavern roof. The lights throughout the entire village went out, plunging everything into a profound darkness, save for the pale moonlight now filtering in from the real world, through the entrance Naruto had used. Every piece of their advanced technology, their sensors, their drones, their communications, was dead. He had single-handedly and non-violently lobotomized their entire civilization in less than 5 seconds. Down below, the fight was already over. His clones, each possessing a fraction of his skill, had systematically and efficiently disarmed every single assassin without causing a single fatality. The elite killers of the Kage Ryu now lay in groaning, disarmed heaps on the dojo floor. The cavern fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Naruto walked to the front of the balcony, looking down at Onakage, who still stood frozen amidst the quiet carnage. Her face a pale canvas of shock, shame, and a terrifying, dawning awe. "This is your clan, Onakage." Naruto's voice boomed, filled not with anger, but with a deep, profound disappointment. "This is the honor you sought to restore. A pack of cowards who hide behind technology they don't understand and tricks they haven't mastered. They are not worthy of your skill. They are not worthy of the name, Shinobi." He turned his gaze back to the 5 terrified elders. "Your reign is over," he said simply. He created 5 simple shadow clones. They grabbed the elders, who were too shocked to even resist. "You will be confined, and the Kage Ryu will choose a new leader. One who remembers that a blade is only as strong as the soul of the one who wields it." He leapt from the balcony, landing silently on the dojo floor in front of Onakage. The shame and fury had gone from her eyes. All that was left was a raw, naked, and absolute awe. She was looking at him not as an opponent, but as a force of nature. A true god of shinobi. He had not just defeated her clan. He had judged them, found them wanting, and dismantled their entire society without breaking a sweat. She did something she had not done since she was a child. She dropped her weapon. It clattered on the wood. And she fell to her knees, bowing her head until her forehead touched the floor. It was not the bow of a defeated warrior. It was the bow of a disciple before a master. The bow of a zealot before a new god. "My life is yours," she whispered, her voice trembling with the force of her shattered worldview being rebuilt around this single, unshakable point of power. "My blade serves you. Command me. I will be your shadow. I will be your fang. I will forge a new honor, worthy of your name." Naruto looked down at her, at this proud, deadly serpent, now willingly and absolutely humbled before him. He had not come here to gain a follower. He had come to neutralize a threat. But he had gained something far more potent. An ally whose loyalty would be as sharp, as absolute, and as deadly as her blade. He had broken her pride, yes, but he had given her something to replace it, a purpose worthy of her immense skill. "Stand up, Onakage," he said, his voice losing its harsh edge, becoming calm and steady once more. "The Cage Ryu need a leader. They need someone to teach them the meaning of true strength. They need you." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with an intense, fanatical light. He was not just giving her a command. He was giving her a new path. Her path, but it was a path that would forever lead back to him. Her obsession had found its true north. As Naruto turned and walked away, vanishing into the darkness towards the village entrance, he left behind a clan in shambles, and a warrior reborn. He had not just won a duel. He had conquered a soul. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Garden of Lost Souls. The peace that followed the Cage Ryu incident was a rare and precious thing, and he inhabitants of the Animarium drank it in like a life-giving nectar. For the first time, the 5 Rangers were not just a team of warriors brought together by destiny, they were becoming a family, orged in the crucible of shared danger and strange, celestial downtime. The days were filled with a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were for training, Naruto pushing them to new heights of physical and tactical mastery. But the afternoons were for them. Max had discovered that the celestial water of the Animarium could be shaped with enough focus, and he'd created a shimmering, ever-changing bowling lane where the pins were made of solidified light. Danny, to his profound joy, had been given his own section of the island to cultivate, and with Shayla's guidance, he was learning to grow plants. Tea bloomed with starlight and chimed with soft, musical notes when the wind blew. Cole, ever the child of the wild, spent his time not with people, but with the Zord spirits themselves, sitting in Tea communion with the red lion or racing the shark Zord through the clouds. Alyssa and Princess Shayla had become inseparable, spending hours in the archive of life, their shared passion for ancient knowledge bridging the 3,000-year gap in their ages. And Taylor had found a new, unsettling, yet not unwelcome, equilibrium. She still trained with a ferocious discipline, but the hard, brittle edges of her military persona were beginning to soften. She would sometimes watch Naruto as he mentored the others, a complex, unreadable expression on her face. The memory of the Ashen Belt, of his profound vulnerability and her role as his guardian, had become a quiet, foundational stone in their relationship. The respect had been there before. Now, there was a fierce, protective intimacy she was still struggling to define. It was on one such idyllic afternoon, as a warm, golden light bathed the floating island, that the attack came. It was not an explosion or a monster. It was a sound. It started as a low, subsonic hum, a discordant note beneath the natural harmony of the Animarium. Then, it grew into a strange, sorrowful melody, a song that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a lament, filled with an ancient, cosmic despair, a lullaby of sweet, beckoning oblivion. Danny, tending to his garden, felt a sudden, crushing wave of apathy. The vibrant, living colors of his flowers seemed to dull, their beauty suddenly feeling pointless, transient. He sat down heavily, a great weariness settling into his bones. Max, in the middle of a perfect strike, saw the light pins shatter and simply shrugged, the thrill of victory turning to ash in his mouth. What was the point? It was just a game. Alyssa looked up from a scroll, a profound intellectual exhaustion clouding her mind. The endless pursuit of knowledge felt like a meaningless chore, a futile attempt to fill an ocean with a thimble. Cole, perched on a high cliff with the lion spirit, felt a deep, ancestral loneliness wash over him. A sense of being utterly and irrevocably alone in the universe. Taylor, practicing her marksmanship, suddenly found her rifle impossibly heavy, the crisp, clear NES of her target blurring into a meaningless gray smudge. The fight, the struggle, the discipline, it all felt like a hollow, exhausting charade. One by one, they succumbed. Their eyes grew heavy, and they drifted into a deep, unnatural sleep, collapsing where they stood or sat, their expressions not of peace, but of weary, soul-crushing resignation. Princess Shayla, too, felt the pull, her NT spirit burdened by the millennia of vigil. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she slumped gracefully against the trunk of a weeping willow, lost to the sorrowful song. Only Naruto remained standing. The song washed over him. its despairing notes seeking purchase in his soul, but they found no anchor. His mind, fortified by the perfect balance of sage mode and the unshakable will that had been forged. In the crucible of the fourth great ninja war, was a fortress against this kind of psychic assault. He felt the sorrow, he understood the despair, but he was not a part of it. He was the eye of a hurricane of pure, weaponized nihilism. He raced through the glades of the Animarium, finding his friends, his family, scattered like fallen leaves. He checked their life signs. They were alive, their bodies unharmed. But their spirits, he could feel their spirits being drawn away, pulled down into some dark, unseen abyss. The source of the attack became clear. In the sacred pool, the water had turned black and stagnant. The image it showed was not of the earth, but of a pulsating, sickly purple nebula of pure, negative energy. And from its depths, a voice, ancient and corrupt, echoed with triumphant, gloating power. "They are mine now, sage," the voice of Master Org boomed, resonating not just in the air, but in Naruto's mind. "Their pathetic little hopes and dreams are but fuel for my garden. A garden where only despair is allowed to bloom. Their bodies are empty shells, soon to be filled with my will. Your Power Rangers are about to become my greatest generals." "Master Org," Naruto growled, his hands clenching into fists. The sheer, insidious evil of the attack was breathtaking. He hadn't attacked their bodies, he had poisoned their souls. "You are immune to my lullaby, it seems," Master Org continued. A note of grudging respect in his voice. "Your spirit is too stubborn, too full of a pointless, illogical light. But it matters not. You cannot punch a dream. You cannot fight a nightmare. You are alone, sage. And you will watch as everything you have sought to protect rots from the inside out." The image in the pool faded, leaving behind only the black, dead water. Naruto stood in the silent, sleeping paradise, utterly and completely alone. The weight of his responsibility, the fate of his friends, settled onto his shoulders. Master Org was right about one thing. This was not a battle that could be won with a Rasengan or a Shinra Tensei. He closed his eyes, his sage senses reaching out, following the faint, silvery threads that were being drawn from his sleeping friends. He found where they led. A pocket dimension, a nexus of psychic energy, Master Org's personal garden of despair. To save them, he would have to walk a path no one else could. He would have to enter their dreams. He gently gathered the sleeping form of Princess Shayla and carried her to the base of the great tree, the very heart of the Animarium. He knelt before her, placing a hand on her forehead. "Shayla," he whispered, pushing a small, pure piece of his own sage chakra into her mind. "Wake up, I need you." Her eyes fluttered open, the deep, ancient blue clouded with the lingering despair of the song. "Naruto." "What?" "Master Org has them," he explained quickly, his voice urgent but calm. "He's trapped their consciousnesses. I have to go in after them. But the dream world is his domain. It's a labyrinth of the soul. I will need an anchor, a tether to the real world to guide me back. Your spirit is the oldest and strongest on this island. You are my lighthouse. Can you do it?" Shayla looked at the sleeping forms of the Rangers, her expression hardening with a fierce, protective resolve. The last vestiges of despair were burned away by the fire of her duty. "I will not falter," she vowed. "I will be your anchor in the storm." "Good," Naruto said. He moved to the center of the glade, sitting down amongst his sleeping friends. He took Taylor's hand in one of his, Alyssa's in the other, creating a physical link. "It's time to take a walk in the Garden of Lost Souls." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. He released his grip on the physical world and allowed his consciousness to be pulled down the silvery threads, following his friends into the waiting darkness. He did not arrive in a garden, but in a place of absolute, sterile white. A room with no corners, no ceiling, no floor. Just an endless, antiseptic infinity. In the center of the room was a single metal table and 2 chairs. In one chair sat Taylor Earhardt, dressed not in her ranger colors or her flight suit, but in a drab gray hospital gown. She was staring at her own hands, her expression utterly broken. Across from her sat a figure in a pristine white coat, his back to Naruto. Subject continues to exhibit signs of extreme delusional paranoia, the figure said, his voice the calm, clinical, and soul-crushingly condescending tone of Major General Thorne. She maintains the fantasy of being a Power Ranger. Of fighting monsters. She speaks of a man with purple eyes who can defy physics. Classic messianic complex transference. Naruto felt a surge of cold fury. This was Taylor's personal hell. Not a battlefield, but a psych ward. Her deepest fear was not death or failure in combat, but the loss of her own mind, of her credibility, of the very identity she had built on logic, discipline, and observable reality. It was real, Taylor whispered, her voice a raw, pleading sound. I saw it. I'm not crazy. Of course you're not, Lieutenant, Thorne's dream echo said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You're just unwell. The pressures of the Raptor program were too much. You cracked. The giant eagle, the man who caught a wrecking ball, the island in the SKY. They are all just elaborate coping mechanisms, created by a mind under extreme duress. Naruto walked forward, his footsteps silent in the white void. She's not lying. The Thorne figure turned, his face a perfect replica. But his eyes were empty, soulless. Ah, the Messiah himself. A figment of the subject's fractured psyche. You were merely a symptom of her illness. Naruto ignored him. He knelt in front of Taylor, bringing his face into her line of sight. Her eyes were dull, unfocused, lost in the fog of gaslighting and self-doubt. Taylor, he said, his voice soft but firm. Look at me. It was real. The red lion is real. The Animarium is real. Your strength, your courage, what you did in the Ashen Belt, it was all real. I was there. I saw you. You were magnificent. A flicker of light in her eyes. A crack in the gray facade of despair. But, he said, he is a lie, Naruto said, his gaze unwavering. A shadow created by Master Org to feed on your deepest fear. The fear that you can't trust your own mind. But you can. You are the most grounded, logical, and observant person I have ever met. You are a pilot. You trust your instruments. Trust yourself now. You are not crazy, Taylor Earhardt. You are a hero. He was validating her, not just her experience, but her very identity. He was the external proof that her reality was, in fact, reality. The Thorne figure began to laugh, a cold, empty sound. Such a convincing delusion. But in the end, it changes nothing. She is broken. No, Taylor said, her voice quiet but now infused with a sliver of steel. She looked up, her eyes focusing on Naruto, and then through him, at the world she had left behind. He's right. She stood up, the gray hospital gown seeming to ripple and transform back into her own clothes. The dullness in her eyes was replaced by a familiar, fiery glare. It was all real. And you, she said, turning to the Thorne figure, are just a bad dream. She balled her hand into a fist, and with a yell of pure, defiant conviction, she punched the dream figure squarely in the face. It didn't recoil. It shattered like glass, dissolving into 1,000 shards of purple smoke. The endless white room dissolved with it, revealing the swirling purple nebula of the nexus of despair. Taylor stood beside Naruto, her breathing heavy but her posture ramrod straight. Thanks, she said, her voice rough with emotion. I needed that, anytime, he said with a warm smile. A shimmering, silver cord appeared, connecting Taylor's spirit back to the real world, to her body. Follow that. I'll be right behind you. I have a few more stops to make. She gave him a nod, a universe of trust and gratitude passing between them in that single gesture, and her spirit shot up the cord, vanishing into the light. The next world was the opposite of Taylor's. It was a sun-drenched, idyllic suburban backyard. A white picket fence, a perfectly manicured lawn, the smell of barbecue in the air. Cole Evans was there, a teenager, tossing a football with a man who had his same wild hair and kind eyes. A woman who looked like an older version of him was setting a picnic blanket, her smile warm and loving. This was not a nightmare. This was a paradise. It was the life Cole had never had, the family he had never known. This was Master Org at his most cruel, his most insidious. He wasn't feeding on fear. He was feeding on a desperate, beautiful, impossible hope. Cole, Naruto said gently, approaching the perfect scene. Cole turned, his face alight with a pure, unadulterated joy that Naruto had never seen on him before. Naruto, you're here. Look, I found them. My parents. They weren't dead. They were just looking for me. The dream parents smiled at Naruto, their faces radiating a perfect, manufactured warmth. "Thank you for taking care of our son," the father said. "But he's home now. He's safe." This was the trap. It was a cage made of love. "Cole," Naruto said, his voice soft but firm. "This isn't real." Cole's smile faltered. A flicker of anger, of denial, crossed his face. "What are you talking about? Of course it's real. It's everything I've ever wanted." "I know," Naruto said, his heart aching for the boy's pain. He didn't try to shatter the illusion. That would be too cruel. Instead, he painted another picture. But the others, Taylor, Max, Danny, Alyssa, Shayla, they're real too. And they need you. The Red Lion needs you. Your tribe, the people who raised you, who loved you when you were truly lost, they need you. They are your family, Cole. They are waiting for you, right now." He was not taking something away. He was offering him something real to replace the beautiful lie. He was reminding Cole of the bonds he had forged, the family he had chosen. Tears welled in Cole's eyes as the truth of Naruto's words settled in. He looked at the perfect, smiling parents, and then he looked into the distance, as if he could see the Animarium, see the faces of his friends. The perfect dream began to flicker at the edges. The sun-drenched sky showing hints of the purple nebula beneath. They are my family," he whispered, the realization a mix of profound sorrow for what he'd never had, and deep love for what he did. He walked over to his dream parents, who were starting to look transparent, their smiles becoming fixed and empty. He hugged them both. "Thank you," he said, not to them, but to the memory. To the hope. "Goodbye." As he let go, they dissolved into motes of light. The perfect backyard vanished, and Cole stood with Naruto in the swirling chaos of the Nexus. The silver cord appeared for him. He looked at Naruto, his eyes filled with a new, mature sadness, but also an unshakable resolve. He nodded his thanks and followed the light home. He found the others in their own prisons. He found Alyssa in a crumbling library, the pages of every book blank, as she wept in despair over her own intellectual impotence. He didn't give her the answers. He simply sat with her and told her, "It's okay not to know. Your worth is not in your knowledge, it's in your heart." He taught her that wisdom was not about having all the answers, but about having the courage to keep asking the questions. He found Danny in a miniature world, a giant of immense strength, where every move he made crushed the beautiful, delicate flowers he loved. Naruto taught him not to fear his strength, but to master it, showing him that the greatest power was found in the gentlest touch. Beside him, in a cacophonous bowling alley where a crowd jeered and laughed, Max was throwing gutterball after gutterball. His confidence shattered. Naruto simply stood beside him and said, "A true champion isn't someone who never loses. It's someone who isn't afraid to get back up after they do." One by one, he guided them. Not by breaking their prisons, but by giving them the key to unlock their own cages. He was not a savior descending from on high. He was a friend, a mentor, walking with them through their darkest valleys. When the last of them, Danny and Max, had followed their silver cords home, Naruto was left alone in the heart of the Nexus. The swirling purple energy began to coalesce before him, forming a massive, shadowy throne. On it sat a towering figure, his form made of pollution, despair, and ancient, malevolent power. "Master Org, you are a fool," the great Org boomed, his voice the grinding of worlds. "You have freed them from their private cages, only to lead them back to the greater prison of a meaningless existence. Hope is an illusion. Bonds are a weakness. In the end, all things decay. All things end. Despair is the only truth." "You're wrong," Naruto said, his own golden spirit flaring to life, a sun in the darkness. "An ending is just a chance for a new beginning. And bonds are not a weakness. They are the only true strength there is. You isolate, you corrupt, you consume. You offer nothing but oblivion. We connect, we build, we love. You think you're showing them the truth. But you're just showing them your own loneliness." He held up a hand, and behind him, the shimmering, spectral images of the 5 rangers he had just freed appeared, their spirits now strong, defiant, and burning with a new, self-aware light. "This is true power, Master Org," Naruto declared, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "And it's a power you will never understand." Master Org roared in fury, lashing out with a tidal wave of pure despair. But the wave broke against the combined light of the six of them, dissolving into harmless mist. Naruto hadn't just freed his friends. He had brought their hope, their courage, their love into the very heart of despair's fortress. And it was a light that the darkness could not extinguish. With a final snarl of frustration, Master Org's form dissolved, the nexus of despair destabilizing, its power broken. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was back on the Animarium, the afternoon sun warm on his face. He was still holding Taylor's and Alyssa's hands. Around him, the others were beginning to stir, their groans and sleepy movements a symphony of life returning. They sat up, looking at each other, their eyes filled with a new, profound understanding. They had not just been saved. They had been seen, in their most vulnerable, most hidden places. And they had been accepted. Healed. Taylor looked at Naruto, and the professional admiration, the protective instinct, had now blossomed into something deeper, something warmer and more terrifyingly real than any battle she had ever fought. Alyssa looked at him, and the intellectual respect had become infused with a deep, emotional gratitude that made her heart beat faster. Cole, Danny, and Max looked at him not just as a commander, but as a brother, the Nay who had walked into their personal hells and led them back into the light. No words were needed. In the quiet, golden afternoon, surrounded by their restored, sleeping paradise, a new, unbreakable bond had been forged among them all. It was a bond built not on shared victories, but on shared vulnerabilities, a bond cemented in the deepest, most secret gardens of their souls. And at its center stood Naruto, not as a god or a sage, but as the heart of their newfound family. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of the Animarium. It began not with a roar, but with a shudder. A deep, tectonic groan that was felt not just in the earth, but in the very soul of every living thing. On the Animarium, the celestial flowers shed their glowing petals like tears. In the oceans, the whales sang a song of mourning. In the great forests, the ancient trees trembled, their leaves turning a brittle, deathly brown. The planet was having a seizure. In the obsidian briefing room, the holographic globe was no longer blue and green. It was a terrifying, swirling sphere of sickly purple and gangrenous black. Vast, continent-sized clouds of noxious smog, thick with the psychic residue of despair from Master Org's failed gambit, were coalescing, choking the atmosphere. The oceans, once teeming with life, were becoming sluggish, oily, and silent. It was a planetary-scale necrosis, happening with unnatural, terrifying speed. At the heart of it all, in the toxic ruins of the Ashen Belt, the remnants of the Org Nexus pulsed like a dying star. Then, with a final, soul-shattering roar, it imploded, drawing in every ounce of filth, every drop of poison, every lingering ghost of defeated Orgs from across the globe. The resealed spirit of Nazca, the raw power of the Blight Org, the malice of 1,000 lesser creatures, all were consumed in a vortex of nihilistic energy. A new form rose from the epicenter. It was colossal, its head scraping the upper atmosphere. It was a grotesque mockery of a god, a titan sculpted from industrial waste, pulsating organic corruption, and solidified despair. Its single, burning eye was the size of a city, and it saw not a world to conquer, but a canvas to erase. This was Master Org, ascended. He was no longer a king of monsters. He had become a god of decay, an anti-creator whose sole purpose was to unmake the world and reshape it into a monument to nothingness. He's unmaking it, Alyssa whispered, her face ashen as she watched the life sign indicators on the global map flatline by the millions per second. He's not just killing the planet. He's erasing the very concept of it. The pain was a physical assault. The Rangers felt their connection to the Animarium flicker and dim, their own life forces being sapped by the planetary-scale blight. This was the final battle. There would be no retreats, no second chances. This was a war for existence itself. Naruto stood before the dying globe, his expression grim, but his eyes burned with a cold, clear fire. He thinks he's become a god. It's time to remind him what it's like to face one. He turned to his team, his voice ringing with an absolute, unshakable authority that cut through their fear and pain. This is not a battle we can win. This is a battle we must not lose. To your stations. We have work to do. The first ally arrived on the wind. as the skies over the world's oceans turned to a toxic, unbreathable sludge. A storm of impossible scale began to push back. It was a clean, furious tempest of pure wind and rain, a planetary immune system kicking into overdrive. At its heart, descending from the heavens onto the Animarium, was Kagura. Her usual severe expression was gone, replaced by a look of fierce, primal fury. The elements themselves were screaming in agony, and she, their oracle, screamed with them. "He is an insult to the sky and a poison to the sea," she declared, her voice the rumble of distant thunder as she addressed Naruto. "My storms will fight to keep the world breathing. But I cannot cleanse the source. That task falls to you." The second ally came from the shadows. In the world's major cities, where panic was beginning to set in newly spawned, techno-organic orgs were emerging from the sewers, a new force appeared. They moved like ghosts, silent and efficient. The Cage Ryu, led by Onakage, her serpent mask now a symbol of protection rather than assassination. They performed surgical strikes, evacuating civilians, neutralizing the new org threats, and creating pockets of order in the growing chaos. A message, encrypted on a frequency only Naruto could perceive, was beamed to the Animarium. It was a single, curt sentence. "The shadows serve the light. We hold the line." The final, and most unexpected, piece of the puzzle fell into place in the blighted heartland of the org domain. Toxica stood before a legion of monstrous, terrified orgs. Before them, a projection of Master Org's new, godlike form pulsed with world-ending power. He was no longer their king. He was their consumer. His promise was not of victory, but of oblivion for all things, including them. "Our purpose was to defile, to conquer," she shouted, her voice ringing with a newfound, desperate conviction. "Not to be unmade. That thing is not our master. It is our end." She looked at Jindrax, her eternal rival, whose flamboyant confidence had been replaced by a primal fear. "Do we die as slaves to nothingness, or do we die as orgs, fighting for our own filthy, beautiful right to exist?" For the first time, a cheer went up from the monstrous horde, not for Master Org, but for her. Toxica, the Duchess of Poisons, had chosen a side. She had chosen life. In the obsidian briefing room, the final strategy was laid. It was a symphony of impossible moving parts. "The Rangers are the shield," Naruto commanded, his voice calm and clear amidst the storm of incoming data. "Your Zords will be our frontline. I'm going to infuse them with a direct feed of my own sage cha. Kra and the full life force of the Animarium. Engage Master Org's primary form. Your job is not to defeat him. Your job is to hold his attention. To endure. To protect the world from his wrath for as long as you can." He turned to the spectral image of Kagura. "Kagura, you are the world's lungs. Your storms will be our air support. Keep the atmosphere from collapsing. Weaken his environmental advantage." A nod to an unseen point in the room. "Onakage, you are the world's hands. Protect the innocent. Keep the chaos on the ground from boiling over." Finally, he looked at a blinking icon on the map that represented Toxica's rebellious faction. "Toxica, you are the cancer within the cancer. You know his weaknesses, his power sources. So chaos, be the poison in his veins." "And you?" Taylor asked, her voice tight. Her eyes locked on his. "What's your role?" "I am the spear," he said, his Rinnegan eyes glowing with a power he had kept in reserve until this very moment. "While you all hold the monster at bay, I will strike at its heart." There were no goodbyes, no final words, just a shared, silent understanding. They were a single, living weapon, aimed at the heart of oblivion. The battle that followed was not a battle. It was a war fought on a planetary scale. The 5 wild Zords, now glowing with a brilliant, golden-green aura, combined into the Wild Force Megazord, larger and more powerful than ever before. It stood against the colossal, ever-shifting form of Master Org, a single, defiant knight against a mountain of nightmares. They fought in the skies over the Amazon, a battle of gods that flattened mountains and boiled rivers. They took blows that would have shattered continents, their Megazord groaning under the strain, but they held the line. Across the globe, Kagura's storms raged, a cleansing fury of wind and lightning that fought back the encroaching smog. On the ground, Onakage's shinobi moved like whispers, saving thousands of lives, their black blades a silent, deadly answer to the Org scourge. And deep within Master Org's blighted territory, Toxica and her rebels waged a guerrilla war, sabotaging the corrupted ley lines that were feeding their former master. But it wasn't enough. Master Org was too powerful. His divine decay was overwhelming them. The Megazord was cracking, its energy reserves failing. Kagura's storms were being pushed back. The world was dying. It was time for the spear. Naruto stood on the head of the faltering Wild Force Megazord, the wind of their battle whipping at his white howry. He looked at the single, burning eye of Master Org, an eye that saw only endings. He closed his own eyes and reached out, not to the world's life force, but to the bonds he had forged. He felt Taylor's unshakable grit, her refusal to give in, a rock in the storm. He felt Alyssa's quiet, fierce intelligence, analyzing, finding the patterns in the chaos. He felt Danny's gentle, unbreakable strength, the will to protect. He felt Max's defiant, cocky courage, the refusal to be intimidated. He felt Cole's wild, pure heart, the spirit of the world itself. He drew it all in. Shayla's ancient wisdom, Kagura's elemental fury, Onikage's honed, deadly focus, even Toxica's venomous, newfound will to live. He became a nexus, not of power, but of love. Of loyalty, of the collective, indomitable will of every soul that had chosen to fight for the dawn. You're right about one thing. Master Org, Naruto projected his voice, a sound that cut through the roaring chaos, a single point of clarity in a universe of noise. All things do end, but that's what makes them beautiful. That's what gives them meaning. He brought his hands together. But we are not an ending. We are a new beginning. The energy that erupted from him was not the golden light of a shinobi, nor the green light of the Animarium. It was a pure, dazzling white, the color of creation itself. His hair bleached to a brilliant, shining white, his skin took on the luminescence of a newborn star. And the whisker marks on his cheeks became conduits of pure, creative energy. The concentric circles of his Rinnegan glowed with the light of a billion souls. He was no longer just the sage of the Animarium. He had become the embodiment of the planet's will to survive. He began to form a Rinnegan in his hand. But it was not a sphere of chakra. It was a miniature, swirling galaxy of pure life force, containing the essence of every Zord, every ally, every hopeful prayer on the planet. Master Org's voice boomed, a sound of pure, cosmic nihilism. Futility. All is dust. Then let me show you what dust can become. Naruto roared back. He shot forward, not flying, but simply willing himself through space. He was the spear. He plunged into the colossal, corrupt form of Master Org, through the layers of sludge and despair, straight towards the black, beating heart of the stolen nexus within. He did not enter a physical space, but a conceptual one. He was in the ultimate garden of lost souls, a place of absolute, final entropy. Before him was the true form of Master Org's consciousness, a cowering, terrified sphere of pure nothingness, terrified of the very existence it sought to extinguish. It lashed out, not with power, but with the ultimate truth of its philosophy, oblivion. It showed Naruto the heat death of the universe, the final, cold silence. But Naruto simply smiled. He held up his hand, the planetary Rinnegan pulsing with warmth and light. Even if it all ends, he said, his voice filled with a profound, unshakable peace, the time we had, the love we shared, it mattered. And that is a truth your nothingness can never erase. He did not thrust the sphere forward as a weapon. He opened his hand and released it. It was not an explosion. It was a sunrise. The sphere of pure life did not destroy the corrupt heart. It healed it. The purifying light washed over the stolen, twisted energy, entangling the knots of hate and despair, and returning it to its original, neutral state. The stolen life force of the planet was liberated. Master Org did not scream in pain. He screamed in terror as he felt the one thing he could not comprehend: forgiveness. Release. The complex, corrupt equation of his being was being simplified back to zero. He unraveled, not in an explosion, but like a thread being gently pulled from a tapestry, his form dissolving into a rain of pure, clean energy that fell back upon the wounded earth. The effect was instantaneous. The black, smog-filled skies cleared, revealing the brilliant, clean blue beneath. The sluggish, oily oceans began to stir, the water turning a sparkling, healthy azure. Across the planet, the dying trees and wilting flowers burst forth with an impossible, explosive new growth. Deserts bloomed. Polluted rivers ran clear. The scars of the earth were being healed in a global wave of pure, revitalizing life. The war was over. The epilogue was not one of grand celebrations or parades. It was one of quiet, profound peace. Humanity, having stared into the abyss, had been given a second chance, and a new, humbling respect for the world they inhabited was born. The old ways of careless consumption were replaced by a new era of symbiosis. On the Animarium, which was now more vibrant and alive than it had been in millennia, a new kind of family had taken root. Kagura was a frequent visitor. Our storms no longer just a planetary defense mechanism, but a tool to help nurture the healing world. She and Naruto would often sit in silence, two beings of immense power, finding a comfortable companionship in their shared duty. Onakage had rebuilt her clan into a true force for good, a network of guardians who protected the world from the shadows. She would sometimes appear on the Animarium, a silent, fleeting presence, to deliver a report to her sage and share a moment of quiet, intense understanding with the only person who had ever broken through her armor. Toxica was gone. She had vanished after the final battle, choosing to forge her own path. But once a year, on the anniversary of the dawn, a single, perfect, and previously unknown species of flower would bloom at the base of the Animarium's great tree, a flower that was both breathtakingly beautiful and subtly, fascinatingly poisonous. It was her signature, a promise that she was out there, finding her own new beginning. And the Rangers, they were home. They were the guardians of this new era, their bonds with their Zords and with each other now absolute. One evening, as a sunset of impossible colors painted the sky, Naruto stood at the edge of the island, looking down at the healed and thriving world. He was not alone. Shayla stood to his left, her hand gently resting on his arm, their connection a deep, spiritual resonance that anchored them both. Alyssa was on his right, debating a point of ancient history with him, their minds dancing in a familiar, comfortable rhythm of intellectual respect. Taylor came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder, her presence a warm, solid, and passionate anchor to the physical world. He leaned back into her embrace, a contented smile on his face. Cole, Max, and Danny were nearby, laughing, their camaraderie easy and unbreakable. He had no single title for them. They were his partners, his students, his family, his loves. Why were the interlocking pieces of his new life, each one essential, each one unique. He had come to this world as a soul adrift, a hero whose war was over. But here, he had found something more profound than any victory. He had found a home. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the wild god sage, the hero, the mentor, the partner, the father of a new, strange, and absolutely perfect family. And as he watched first stars appear in the clean night sky, he knew, with a certainty that settled into the very core of his being, that his greatest adventure was just beginning. Chapter 10 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.